October 30, 2022, President Akufo-Addo declares, quote, "We are in a crisis. I do not exaggerate when I say so," end quote. The experts, economic and finance PhDs, have been saying this for over a year now. The unsustainable debt situation, they have become a broken record on it. Government kept borrowing and celebrating it. Only a couple of weeks ago, the president was touring the country and touting people he said were his best performing ministers. These are the same who have supervised the mess. They refuse to take any share in the crisis. What did the World Bank say recently about our agriculture or our economy? Ghana got ranked as the country with the highest food prices in sub-Saharan Africa in 2022. The report noted the obvious that since January, food prices here have gone up by 122%. The Statistical Service reported on the bizarre all-time high food inflation. One of the best performing ministers who kept denying things just announced the government is to compete with the market women in selling groceries. Yes, this is how bad it gets. The president gave a speech. It was expected to be the speech of his lifetime. But was it? He said he's listening, a listening president, and he cares. Does he? He said, "There shall be no haircuts. Your investment, pensions will not diminish." True or false? What did he miss? Can or will the speech fix this mess? Activist Martin Pebu has groups, including Fix the Country, and individuals joining him this morning on a Kumipreko Reloaded demonstration to demand resignation of the president and his vice or impeachment. But, fellow Ghanaians, the president wants this to be the time for collective action to rescue Ghana from the throes of this economic crisis. Join us and let's do exactly that this morning. I'm Samson Lardy Anyenini. We'll be right back to deal with the vexed matters. You're welcome back. This is Newsfile. It's your most authoritative news analysis platform. And here on Newsfile, as always, we put Ghana first. I'm Samson Lardy Anyenini. I'm your host. My take this morning, a brief one. I title it, "The Big Dollar Envelope Businessman in Parliament." So we have been told that there was a big, wealthy businessman who has access to Parliament and to the parliamentarians. And so 95 MPP MPs. Now, so the majority leader tells us their position is not only theirs, but the entire majority caucus in Parliament. So they took the view that they needed to get the president to sack Ken Ofori-Atta and Charles Edouard from the finance ministry for various reasons, including for supervising the present mess. The MPs later disclosed to us that this businessman, they refused to name, came to the house met them and handed envelope with money. So there was an offer and it was received. This is a transaction that resulted in a crime. At what point did any of these MPs realize that they needed to return this envelope, as they have been telling us? How should we come to a point of believing them that they in fact returned these envelopes? Did they? How many took it and how many returned it? What the MPs have dealt with so far leaves me in a position to believe that they are not being frank and truthful with us. This is a group of MPs. They are bold to come forward to demand the resignation or the removal of Ken Ofori-Atta and his deputy from office. His deputy at the states, so to speak, from office. Let us all dare them to name this businessman. If they do not, let us not believe them that they took the money and returned it. In fact, we are right to conclude that they took the bribe and engaged in a corrupt conduct, which is punished by the law. They cannot be scared of naming this businessman. Just imagine that this businessman, so to speak, was on the political divide on the other side. Will these MPs have told us about a businessman who brought bribes to them without naming him? And what exactly are they afraid of? They are teaching the very wrong things to our community. So this morning, my take, I say, if you men want us to continue to refer to you as honorable members of that parliament, please name the businessman to start with, or say no more about this situation. And as a serious parliament, the Speaker of Parliament, you don't gloss over this, you don't ignore it. There ought to be a serious probe. As a serious country, this ought not to be allowed to pass. Everyone who has spoken about the bribe, Andy Appiah-Kubi, the majority leader, Osei Mensah Bonsu, and those who have confirmed it, must answer questions. And the businessman must be named. This businessman must not continue to have business to do with the state, because they tell us that is the class of businessman we are dealing with. That is my take. Until they name this businessman, these are no honorable people. These are cowards who must be told exactly who they are. We'll be right back to introduce my guest to you and to begin the discussion this morning. It's brought to you by Bank of Africa, as strong as a group and close as a partner. MTN everywhere you go. Star Assurance, your solid partner. Ashesi University, educating ethical and entrepreneurial leaders for Africa. Robert & Sons Optical Services, your comprehensive eye care service provider for 31 years. Duraplus, how you get your water matters. Remember, where Duraplus goes, water flows. St. Thomas Eye Hospital, providing excellence in eye care. Haptel, everything you and Miway Insurance. Dial *165 hash on the MTN to join. Magdan Aviation, your dependable private aviation request solved. We'll be right back. Right. So you just heard President Akufo-Addo looking very fresh, younger, at the time of the Kumi Preko demonstration. And today we are having Kumi Preko Reloaded, and it's being led by Martin Pebu, who is a lawyer and rights activist. And let's see how he's able to marshal as many as Akufo-Addo and his team then, Kwesi Pratt and the rest of them, the Alliance for Change, how they managed using the vehicles of the political parties then, the opposition political parties, to mobilize so much of that mass onto the street. How this single Martin Pebu and his collaborators are able to do anything close to that. But is that what is important to them? Let's talk to them briefly as they begin to gather at the Obra Sports to commence the Kumi Preko Reloaded demonstration. But Kofi Bentil, who is with Imani Africa, who is Vice President of Imani Africa, joins us to also share his thoughts on what is going on. We'll get to the grounds of the converging point for the demonstration shortly. Kofi, thank you so very much for joining us.
Thank you, Samson. Do you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, but faintly. Hi, Kofi.
I hope it gets better.
All right, all right. Okay, so as I understand, are you?
Yes.
Yes. Are you also getting on the grounds for the demonstration?
Unfortunately, I have to attend a family funeral somewhere. That's why I am not even able to do the video.
Okay.
But Martin has our full support, as you know. So we are with him in spirit. But I couldn't.
Okay. The question that's being asked is, he and his group are doing Kumi Preko Reloaded. Kumi Preko represents, this mass of protesters on the streets. Do you envisage that today's demonstration will be able to gather any numbers close to that?
Well, first let me say that Martin has already succeeded. Martin has made his points. He has stood by his points. And you realize, even though he's one of us, he didn't really mobilize the rest of us and everything to get into this, to, work together with him. He went on as if it was a one-man thing, and already he's built a coalition around himself. And so it is not going to be about the numbers. It is going to be about the fact that one man stood and made a point, stood against all odds, and he will manage to get a good number of people on the streets today. And even those who are not on the streets with him, like myself, yourself, you have to be in the studio for any reason, his message resonates with us. You may not ask for exactly what he's asking for, but nobody denies that he has a strong message, and those who have to listen, have to look beyond just the numbers and take note of what he's saying. Now, we all pray for stability. We all pray that things will move properly. And we should note that this is not wrong. We, however, hope that people don't say that, oh, he got only 1,000 or 2,000 people, and because of that, we will ignore him. Because when it rolls and all of us now get on, we We hope that it will just be a kumipreko and we will not lose an hunger, but we will get our voices out there. And whether the president resigns or he does not resign, we should note that it is a legitimate call, okay? And we need to proceed in such a way that we preserve this democracy, but still make sure that citizens' voices will always be stronger than the voices of those.
When you said that Martin is one of us, but decided to do his own thing, were you referring to the Citizen Coalition?
Yes, I'm referring specifically to the Citizen Coalition, but also yourself, myself, lawyers and activists. Martin belongs to a number of circles.
That's right.
Specifically, I'm referring to the Citizen Coalition, and people must appreciate that even though Martin could have asked all of us, and work with us on that level, he chose to go it alone. And what I'm saying is that we are with him in spirit. At least I am with him in spirit. All right. And people should not. The question was about the numbers. I don't know what numbers will be there today, but he has already succeeded. All right. If people start talking about the fact that it's about numbers, they will miss the point. And if you miss the point, you are likely to continue making the same mistake, and then you will bring upon yourself very, very serious troubles.
You heard on my take when I spoke about the MPs who are shielding a briber. And I want to rather call them to bribers. If you are shielding a briber, if you are protecting a thief, you are also a thief. Either you are also a thief, or I don't know what else you are. So you have politicians that sometimes will have absolutely no credibility, but when they call for a demonstration, the streets are packed. The Citizens Coalition, how many? Dozens of civil society groups coming together. Recently, we went on a demonstration about the Auditor General. The numbers were not as exciting as if that demonstration had been called by NPP or NDC. What do you think is going on?
Well, we all need to appreciate very clearly that the political parties have a political machinery. And this machine, they have built over years, and they have built it on a nationwide scale. All right. And so they have the systems already in place, and they will be able to mobilize their millions of people who stand in the rain and in the line to vote for them. They can easily mobilize that. If you take a citizens coalition, we are really just citizens. And it is the strength of our message that makes people come out and then work with us.
So Occupy Flagstaff House. I remember being at the Efwa Sutherland Park with you and many people, and now the faces that many people can recognize from the Flagstaff House, Occupy the Flagstaff House. Ken Oforiatta himself was there, in fact, together with his family. I took a picture of them because that was admirable for me to see that, a politician, will come out and bring the whole family with them for a demonstration. This is one thing I want to ask you about. As the demonstration proceeded, you could not have access to the Jubilee House. Some people were arrested. I remember people like you in particular, you jumped into the police van and said they will not take the people they have arrested alone, they will take you together with them. Eventually, even though the police did everything to stop you from getting to the Jubilee House, you managed to get to the Jubilee House to make your presentation. These days, if you want to make a demonstration and you want to end up at the Jubilee House, you are directed by the police. They insist that you should end up at the Flagstaff, at the Independence Square. What difference does it make that this demonstration will end at the Independence Square and not at the Jubilee House?
Well, I think it's something the police do. Their own explanation is that they want to keep the peace, they want to make sure that things are orderly. But I think it is just one of those things to protect the presidency and the president, and maybe make, dampen a bit of the enthusiasm around the demonstration. But again, it is really not about that. Whether you get to the Jubilee House or you get to Independence Square, it is about the message you send. And if you remember when we did Occupy Flagstaff House and we were at Sutherland Park, they said we shouldn't go to Jubilee. We managed to, break through and get to Jubilee somehow. Okay, the point is the message that went out in the day. We were mocked about numbers and other things, but we managed to get the message out, and nobody denies that particular demonstration made a difference. So I believe wherever they end, okay, in the spirit of trying to make sure things are orderly, I believe that they will use the route that the police has given them. Indeed, Samson, sometimes when the police give you a route, they themselves preach it. In our last demonstration on the Auditor General, the route they gave us is not the route they led us through. And some of us felt we should go by the route that they gave us. So this thing about routes and whatever it is, sometimes you just comply because really you are not seeking chaos, but seeking to make your message. And whichever route they give you, I think that if you get your message out, you would have succeeded regardless.
Is it a good call or a call that is permissible to be asking that the president and his vice resign?
I like to look at it this way. It is a proper call. It is justified for people to feel the way they are feeling now. I will not make the value judgment of whether it is appropriate or not, but I would say everybody must understand that it is within the rights of the citizen to ask that the persons that they appointed into the office of president and other offices, if they have clearly shown that they are not able to do the job, and if they have not articulated a good enough plan going forward, and we do not have a confidence that they are going to be able to lead us out of the present mess we are in, it is a proper call to ask them to resign. Indeed, in other jurisdictions like the UK, the party itself can organize, take a vote of no confidence against you and throw you out and replace you mid-term, as we have seen happen in the UK. Over here, we have a law, our constitution actually gives Parliament the power to do so. But clearly, you have had cause to complain about Parliament even today. In the face of crime, our parliamentarians cower and they hide. So I don't know what they will do with the laws that we have given them. If you look at chapter 8 concerning the presidency, the president can be removed simply by his conduct. If his conduct creates problems within the country which are not justified. All right. In other places, they call them high crimes and misdemeanors. Now, what that covers is anything from small things to big things. As long as it rises to the point where you lose the confidence of the people you are ruling, it is grounds to remove you. And in this country, it is Parliament that has been given that authority, but clearly we don't think they are going to use it. Now, citizens have the right to peacefully protest and require or seek or ask that the president exercise his power to resign, which is also constitutional. Now, in the case of Martin, I'm not going to make the value judgment. Martin, for instance, says the president and his vice and his government must go. Now, the constitution allows that the president can resign and the vice president can take over. The president can resign with the vice president. The president can resign with the vice president and his cabinet. And the country will go on. We'll find a way to move from here to, another. It is not about whether it's good or not. It is a proper call. They are justified to make the call. I think the people who have to listen should listen. And I think this is one step in a number of steps. I believe that depending on how things go on from here,
you mentioned chapter 8 of the Constitution, and the specific provision I think we should look at to be sure about what you said. Article 69. It says that, clause 1, the president shall be removed from office if he is found, in accordance with the provisions of this article, A, to have acted in willful violation of the oath of allegiance and the presidential oath set out in the second schedule 2, or in willful violation of any other provision of this constitution. So my question is, number 1, can it be said that the president has acted in willful violation of his oath of allegiance to Ghana or the presidential oath, or that he has acted in willful violation of any provision of the Constitution? B, to have conducted himself in a manner which brings or is likely to bring the high office of president into disrepute. Has he done that? Ridicule or contempt or prejudicial or inimical to the economy or the security of the state. And finally, to be incapable of performing the functions of his office by reason of infirmity of body or mind. Where will you say the president has faulted and therefore this provision should be activated as being demanded by the Nana Must Go demonstrators?
I think the Nana Must Go demonstrators will fall squarely in Article 69, 1BII, which reads, the president shall be removed from office if he is found to BII have acted in a way inimical to the economy or the security of the state. So if the president has done anything or failed to do anything that has created a problem, an adverse situation in the economy of this country, there is grounds to call for him to go. So again, whether you agree or not, Martin is sound in law.
Okay.
Now, we have a situation where...
Kofi, please hold on for me. I'll return to you because the president does not admit any faults in the economic problem we find ourselves in. It is Ukraine. It is covered. Let's go to the grounds where people are beginning to converge. Kojo Brace, Samuel Kojo Brace with JoyNews is on the grounds and joins us right now. Hello, Samuel. Hello. Okay, so he's standing by with Martin Pebu and some other leaders of the demonstration, and we want to talk to them. Let's have the pictures. Let's see how it is looking this morning at the Obra Sport. I think Obra Sport deserves a different name and perhaps maybe some statue to represent what it really represents. Every demonstration begins from Obra Sport. Yes, Kofi, so you were making the point that he has conducted himself in a manner which is inimical to the economy or the security of the state by the current situation. Is that what you say?
Yes, I'm saying that Martin is squarely within that space.
Okay.
To say that what is going on here has been because of the actions and the omissions of the president. Again, if you read the Constitution, you would see that the persons who are acting for the president in terms of his executive power act on his behalf. In other words, he takes responsibility for their actions. So whoever has acted in a way that has brought us to this particular position, the president takes responsibility for that. Now, in this particular case, the president has expressly taken the responsibility. Indeed, when people asked for certain members of his cabinet to be reshuffled, he said no. When they asked for certain members of his cabinet to be removed, he said no. When he was asked whether he was happy with their performance, he said yes. When he was asked why he would not change them, he said they have performed excellently. What it means is that the president agrees with everything that is being done in his name, and he has taken responsibility for what is going on. Now, to that extent, if we have a situation where this economy is melting down the way it is, then indeed we can say the president may have acted or omitted to act, and that has caused something which is inimical to the economy of this country. Look, there are people today in Ghana who don't know what the future holds, even a week from now. People's salaries mean nothing right now, and they don't know how they are going to make it from here to there. So you have a situation where really the economy is in real trouble. Whatever reasons that are given, the point that is being made is that the Constitution has provided that where the person in charge fails to give us a good enough economy, it is grounds to ask him to leave. Of course, you can't force him to leave. So the president can choose to say, well, I believe in what I'm doing and I'm going to live out the rest of my term. But people must also appreciate that there are different levels. I mean, in certain places in Hong Kong and in other places, there were months, consistent, demonstrations, and the place became ungovernable. So the point we need to make clearly is that Martin's call is squarely within the law, and there is enough evidence that this economy is not doing well, and that it is the prerogative of the president to do something about it. He has chosen to say everything that is going on is something he agrees with, and that the hardships are a result of his governance, and so we should take him, we should hold him responsible for that.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Kofi Bento. Kofi Bento is Vice President of Imani Africa, and he is also a lawyer. He's a Senior Vice President of Imani Africa, and he supports the Nana Must Go demonstration, which is Kumi Preko Reloaded. He says he supports it fully, even as he travels to attend to a funeral. Now, let's go to the grounds. And Kojo Brace, I can see you. You look like you are assisting the police to do their duty. Is that it?
Which is led predominantly by lawyer Martin Pegbu. We are on the Kwame Nkrumah Avenue. A very interesting scenes here. Some people have sat on the floor and singing a song, which of course I cannot translate into English because of the language. They are calling on the president really to do something about the situation we find ourselves in at the present moment. It's a heavily patronized demonstration. Hundreds of Ghanaians are out here demonstrating and registering their displeasure about the Ghanaian economy. I mean, we've walked quite a mile from Obrasport to this point on the Nkrumah Avenue now. I'm told that this would culminate into the release of a petition to the presidency next week. But for now, lawyer Martin Pegbu is leading the demonstrators to register their displeasure about the Ghanaian economy. I tell you what, I've seen taxi drivers, I've seen traders, I've seen former government appointees, I've seen different categories of people here. Adib Sani is a security analyst, and he is one of the leaders of this particular demonstration. He is with us here at this particular moment. Adib, in terms of participation, how do you see it, first of all?
Well, I think it's been encouraging. We received quite a number of calls from other parts of the country, people wanting to be part of this protest. Even though it is not nationwide at this particular moment, we still had some people coming from other parts of the country. I was just speaking with a number of friends who came all the way from Tamale to be part of this event, and I feel it is refreshing and it's representative of the level of anger amongst particularly young people who have been pushed into uncertainty and into the survival mode.
Well, now you see the real thing happening. Demonstration is happening. Days to today, there's been calls for people to join. In terms of impact, how do you feel about the numbers you've seen and the sort of impact it can have?
Well, we've had enough of bickering, you know. It's a general Ghanaian thing. We love to bicker, but we don't love to come out to protest. We are tired of sitting on the fence, folding our arms and turning a blind eye. I think it is important that we come out in our numbers, and we're very categorical about the need for it to be as peaceful as possible. We don't want anyone to come here with a pointed item or, a sharp object. We don't want guns because it is not in our interest if it turns violent. But the possible impact is the likelihood that what we see here, would transcend nationally and would have every region, every part of Ghana doing this. And that is based on a certain caveat. If nothing is done about our demands, what we intend doing next is to get Parliament to start impeachment proceedings against the president. If that doesn't turn out well, then we would make it a national effort and prove to the politicians that we wield the power. We hired them and we can fire them. They are our servants. We are not the servants. And I think that would have to be made clear.
With all of this, is there a duration within which you're expecting the positive outcomes to come? If otherwise would then lead to the sort of demonstration you're talking about?
There's no room for mediocrity. As soon as possible, the president and the vice would have to leave. They are bereft of ideas. They don't know what they are about. I told you today that I'll build you a 6-story building. I'm poor. How do I do that? That's exactly what the president did on Sunday, promising like we're in the campaign era, like he did before, promising everything, including bridges where there are no rivers. Okay, that is what we want to avoid. Okay, so what we are saying is the president and the vice should leave as simple as possible.
You are a security person. In terms of how the security is, what's your observation of what you've seen so far?
I think it's okay. We followed all the necessary protocols. We wrote to the police in line with the Public Order Act 5 days clear. The police responded. As we can see, there's a lot of police presence. Our men have also been of their good behavior. We have repeated over and over again. We don't want any violence. And we're suspecting a possibility of infiltration. But we've asked everybody to be each other's keeper. Keep an eye. If you see anyone behaving in an uncharacteristic manner, you have to address it, or speak with the organizers, or perhaps even the police. Even yesterday, we gave the numbers of the police line out. If anything goes wrong, you are not in a position to speak with the police or anyone, you can call the police number 18555. So far, it has been good, and I'm hoping that by the end of the day, it will be peaceful, so we don't have any violence marring it and perhaps deviating the opinions, and the narrative from the main crux of the matter to the violence that might mar the whole event.
Thank you. So that's our deep Sunday there. Now let's try and get other people to share their thought here. I've seen Akosia Dai Odike here. I'll be getting close to him to find out more. Also, I've seen Oliver Barker Vomawo, who is also the leader of one of the movements that has joined here, Arise Ghana. Well, the Drivers Front also say they have their reasons to put across as well. Well, as for you, we know it's all about fuel, or it goes beyond that?
It goes beyond fuel. The reason why it goes beyond fuel is that, you see, these days, you can see rickety cars on our roads, but nobody is asking, why rickety cars? Always, drivers keep complaining about fuel, because fuel is the immediate commodity that everybody sees and talk about. But people doesn't care about the maintenance of the car. And what is going there, nobody cares about it. And it's bothering us. Even what I'm saying now, when you go...
But how is this related to the president's work?
Exactly so. You see, recently we were buying Sprinter engine for 120 million old currency. That's 12,000. But as I speak with you, Sprinter engine is gone for 250 million. 25,000 Ghana cedis. Within a spread of only 3 weeks. 3 weeks. But nobody talks about that. It's only fuel. And as I'm here, I'm citing government-owned transport industry for you to go and ask them. Go to Metromas. They will tell you they are the edge of collapsing. When you go to STC, they will tell you it left with only some lab briefing that they will collapse as STC. The fact is that fuel alone has shoot since May 2020 up to this very November 2022.
So if you are to ask something from the president, what will it be for you?
What I will tell the president is that TOR must begin to work so that we get the fuel at cheaper price. We get bitumen and other things to fix our roads, because our roads are no more worthy. The cars are worthy, but the roads are turning the cars into unworthiness, which is very, very bad. Very, very bad. So what I am saying is that the president should revive TOR, because TOR is dead, but we commercial drivers and other drivers are paying to the TOR management, in which they are not doing anything.
Thank you very much. So that's him. We just passed by Adabraka Police Headquarters. Let me try and get Akwesi Adai-Odike as well to let us understand why he also moved from Kumasi to join. But Chief, yeah, what brought you out here? What are you looking forward to in terms of what you expect the president to do?
Yeah, on a more serious note, I have never been part of a demonstration. I'll only pass by, buy water, and then drop it somewhere for the demonstrators. But it has come very necessary that we do this thing, because right now I parked my car for 2 weeks in the house just because of the increment of fuel. And not that alone, we have tires, we have engine oil to take care of. Nana Akufo-Addo gave us the sign from day one that he can't govern, because when you ask him every question, he refers to Bawumia. So he was telling us that he can't govern, but we didn't just pay heed to it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let's try and go deeper in search of Akwesi Adai-Odike and Voma and other people to really understand and to speak to them to get their side of the story as well. What they also expect government to do about the current economic situation. Let me still go back and try and get access to Oliver Barker-Vormawor and Akwesi Adai-Odike to get a sense or two from them. Well, so I've gotten to Akwesi Adai-Odike. Chief, how are you doing?
By God's grace, I'm fine.
People say Akwesi moved from Kumasi to Accra. What pushed you here this far?
I'm here to also make my presence felt with the good people of Accra. So I am doing radio programs and a familiarization tour.
No, but in terms of the call, I mean, this demonstration is to call on the president to step down. Is that something you do agree as well? Why do you also agree?
Of course, yes. I've been #1 advocate for Nana-Addo to step aside, because Nana-Addo doesn't respect Ghanaians. Nana-Addo thinks that he is doing Ghanaians a favor as a president. And Nana-Addo doesn't respect the oath he sworn on 7th January to do the good, everything possible to transform this country. In the midst of pandemic, Nana-Addo exhibited a profligate lifestyle, hiring private jets, bathing in the sky, whilst ordinary Ghanaians are suffering. Nana-Addo is there only to apportion blames. He doesn't have any solution to the plight of ordinary Ghanaians. Nana-Addo and his cronies, they don't want to do the will of the people. And Nana-Addo wants everybody to do the beck and call of him. Nana-Addo and his cronies is milking this country at the detriment of the development of ordinary Ghanaians. Akufo-Addo is not a leader, he is an authoritarian, and we cannot allow him to continue as president of this nation.
All right, so that's Akwesi Adai-Odike there. If he doesn't step down, what will you do?
The Aluta will continue unabated until Nana-Addo is out of office. This is a tip of iceberg. It is just a signal. If Nana-Addo doesn't step aside, we will demonstrate every day, and the nation's activity will come to a halt.
Okay. All right, so let me try and get close to lawyer Martin Pegbu and have a chat with him to also get him to speak. Okay, so that's it. I'm told that very, very shortly he will be joining us. But this is where we are. We are around Adabraka area. The demonstration is heating up as we progress through the route. It tells you that more people are joining to express their disappointment about the economy and to really increase calls on the president and his government to do something about this economy. It's heating up. I mean, as I look forward, I see a lot of numbers, hundreds of people clad in red and black joining this demonstration. And I'll soon be speaking to lawyer Martin Pegbu to really get to understand him. Okay, so here we are. Samson, let me give you to lawyer Martin Pegbu so you can have a word or two with him. So, Samson, lawyer is listening to you now.
Yes, Martin, thank you very much for joining us. Martin, You are asking the president to resign. Resigning is a voluntary act according to the constitution, or even by English definition of the word resignation. So, what do you make of what you are doing?
Yeah, this has been very successful. Thousands of our fellow citizens have come out to send a message to President Kufuor that enough of the family and friends business, that he must resign. He came to superintend over a government that is family and friends, and in the process, they have benefited from every cedi and every dollar we have borrowed, which is wrong and which has led to the current economic crisis. So Kufuor must go, Bawumia must go, Ken Ofori-Atta must go. They have breached Article 284 of the Constitution because every cedi we borrow, every dollar we borrow, it goes through data bank, gets a cut. Data bank gets a cut, which is wrong. Data bank gets a commission. Data bank gets a commission, which is wrong. We can't allow this conflict of interest. In this case, that is corruption. That we are using public office for private gain. That is wrong.
Right, Martin.
Wrong.
Yes.
Must go.
Right,
they are stealing from us.
Yes, Martin.
They are doing is also stealing.
Right, Martin.
Sole sourcing stealing.
Martin.
They are sole sourcing. Even the cathedral project, we want the Speaker of Parliament, when President Kufuor and Bawumia go to take over, the Speaker has to assume the office of President pursuant to Article 60, Clause 13 of the Constitution, that when the President and the Vice have been removed, or they've resigned, or they've died, the Speaker assumes office. And within 3 months, we must have election. So in this case, the Speaker will take over and shepherd us whilst the Electoral Commission sees through the
That is if the president resigns, and by Article 60, 6, 11, and the 13 you are referring to, resignation is a self-action. It is not. How are you going to get it if it has to be his decision?
And the Russian-Ukraine war are affecting. Isn't COVID and the Russian-Ukraine war affecting Togo? Aren't COVID and the Russian-Ukraine war affecting Burkina Faso? Aren't COVID and the Russian-Ukraine war affecting Nigeria? Aren't COVID and the Russian-Ukraine war affecting other African countries? So what happened? What caused our city to be the worst in Africa and indeed the worst in the world at a time? Okay.
Martin, we hear you say that if he does not resign, then he has to be impeached. Impeachment has to be initiated in Parliament, not on the streets, right?
It means that President Kufuor and Bawumia and Ken, they are super incompetent. They are super incompetent. The economic management team must go. Enough of this. We are tired. We are dying. People are hungry. People can't buy food. People can't pay rent. And so, yet this is a government that had promised to pay rent. A government that had promised to pay rent. And yet now, people can't pay rent. People are dying. Please, President Kufuor, Bawumia, Ken Ofori-Atta, please resign now.
But the president gave assurance that they are doing something about this whole situation, and that they have reduced their salaries by some percentage. They are negotiating with the IMF. They are putting in place certain measures to ensure that they ease the pressure on the Ghanaian economy. Aren't these assuring enough for us to say, okay, let's give them the time for them to see how they can turn things around for us?
Those are too little, too late. Those measures are too little, too late. The president had 6 years to change the structure of the Ghanaian economy to avert part of the problem, but he couldn't. So time has run out on him. He must go. Bawumia must go. Ken must go.
Is there any timeline you are giving them to go or to vacate their positions?
Yes, we are giving them by Wednesday 9th November.
Okay, we can end it here, and then maybe when it's time that the leaders can hear us, then we may be able to put our questions to them. But we will have to go to assess the president's speech he has addressed that he gave on Sunday. Before we do that, I have some of my guests right here in the studio. I've got Richard Anyagba, who is Director of Communications of the New Patriotic Party, and Alexander Percival Segbefia, who is NDC Director of International Relations. and former Minister of Health. Let's hear from you briefly about what is going on the streets of Accra, and then we can proceed to go to the statement that the president had to, give to the country. So, Richard, must be a very difficult time for the party in government and also for the government, right?
Well, thank you very much, Samson. I think that democracy is a blessing, and in moments like this, you cannot help but appreciate what opportunity we had in this Fourth Republic to allow for free expression and to ensure that the security system of our country allows and supports the rights of every Ghanaian to have that expression. I think that is good to see my brother Martin.
Maybe we should say facilitates rather than allows, because allows could mean, permission.
Support.
When this is a constitutionally guaranteed.
Very well. Well, yeah, so I'm saying that from a background where hitherto you won't have that situation.
That's right.
And so, yes, so that facilitation is key, and to ensure that people can go and make their voices heard and be part of our democratic process. So that is acceptable. But on the other hand is the substance of why they're on the street. And I think when you asked the question earlier, it was said to not be a question of value judgment, that you shouldn't worry really about the validity of the reason, that there shouldn't be any moral value placed on it. I think that it should be about that. There must be cause, because the fact that there's free expression doesn't mean that you just take to the street just because you want to. There must be a basis for that. And I look, and when you read the Constitution, on the face of it, I don't see any basis. I think he was referring to 69(1) II. I don't think there is any incident in this country that allows for any expression of the people on the street to be justified on that basis. So the only basis, in my view, that perhaps the demonstrators have this morning to be on the street is democratic. But in terms of substantive issue, to say that government or president has done anything incidental to cause them to be on the street, I don't see it. And I think that we can get into the specifics. I've been spending time looking through the journey that this government, led by Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo, has taken Ghana through from 2017 up until now. And you can't find one single basis for the behavior. Certainly, in these times, Ghana is going through hardship. That hardship can be explained, it can be rationalized. The president spoke about it, and the data shows exactly that there are incidental issues that are beyond our control that is forcing the situation on us. And I think that the larger conversation we're going to have will give space for evidence to be submitted that explains the situation, which is not equal to neglecting or abdicating responsibility on the part of government to say that because of the global situation, we don't take responsibility. But if we are explaining the responsibility that must be taken in the context of the global happenings. And I think that when the issues are contextualized and properly assessed, you come to see that the government has taken appropriate measures to ensure that even where we are is actually not as bad given the measures that has been taken. But we need to be clear in saying that the difficulties are real, but that does not give justification for the call.
But there are those who insist, for example, that if you take Article 69, when you are referring to Clause 1, II, that there is threat to the economy of this country. The president says we are in crisis. Mm-hmm. And he says when he says so, he's not joking with it.
Yeah.
He's not exaggerating it. And then the questions of national security threat, hunger could be one of such. Yeah. You say there's no basis constitutionally. They say this is where we want to look at. That's what Kofi Bentil was referring to.
Yeah, so I'm saying that, well, see, all of these things, we all have to defer to the evidence, right? So what is the evidence? The material experience of people, that is one. But then you look at the efforts that is measurable in economic data to say that...
Or rather, what is the cause?
Well, the cause, yes, the cause is one thing, which I say that you can explain in global context. Now, once you move away and you come home, the measures that are being taken can also be assessed, right? But you have a larger umbrella cause of the issue that can be assessed. And so the difficulty for me is to say that because we are in a situation which government is doing something about a situation, we neglect all of the measures that are being taken. Now, we can question what the validity of the measures, whether or not they are able to solve the problem or not. We can debate that. But to say that because the problem hasn't been solved yet, wherein we see that something is being done, but because the problem is not solved, we will agitate and ask for his removal. So now you are getting into an unsustainable situation where you bring something in as the president, and in 2 days, if he doesn't finish, then he must go, as though that there's a magic wand to be waved. That is almost the
when they make the argument that the professors of economics have told us that there were certain steps that ought to have been taken earlier in time, and the signs were all there on the wall, but this government simply, just didn't take the right actions. How about other countries where finance ministers have decided to resign, even though they cannot say that I am personally responsible for anything, where even presidents have resigned, not because the constitution commands them to resign, because they have not been able to manage the economy well?
But you see, there's a case where you want to look at, perhaps we're looking again at UK situation where the Chancellor of the Exchequer resigns because there are challenges. But when you come to Ghana, you can't make the same argument, because the two markets we're talking about, one is almost perfect and the other is imperfect, right? So that your policy intervention, the pass-through, the probability of your policy implement to take hold in our imperfect market compared to that perfect market is totally different. So the economic prescriptions that you have heard from economic professors and the rest of them, they are making those prescriptions as though that Ghana's market is perfect. Because right now, I think we'll go into that matter fairly shortly. The government is, in the president's speech, talks about assuring or trying to tackle cost of living expense, cost of living problems. That essentially tells you the implementation of contractionary policy to deal with inflation and the rest of those. But in this country, the inflation situation we are faced with is not demand-driven, it's cost-driven, which is global in nature, right? So your policy tools, the interventions you are making, because the market is imperfect, it is difficult for you to get the outcomes that you're saying. So in other words, you are implementing a policy which by design should give you an outcome of A. But when you implement that policy in Ghana, you don't get that outcome because of the nature of the market. This same policy, Samson, the United States is implementing the same policy. All right? They are tightening their monetary policy, increasing their prime rate. But when they did that, you saw capital flight to them because the market is almost perfect. The response you are looking for, you will get because people will be drawn to the high interest to be able to store their value in your money.
He said he wanted to explain to, quote, in a language that every market woman and indeed every trader in our country understands. And he says, let me say that the basic problem we face is that we are not making as much money as we need to spend. And what little money we do make is going to pay for debts we have contracted to fund development projects we must. Some of the analysts that we speak about who have been on this show over a period, some have taken a view that exactly the point. And that's why when the president says he must take personal responsibility to a large extent, you begin your administration by spending 25 billion Ghana cedis for bank collapse issues. You don't have that money. You are told that what the banks needed to survive, perhaps, would have been some 8-9 billion. So you don't have 25 billion. You spent it. So that's debt you need to pay. So you have cost yourself. You are putting money into a cathedral. You don't have money. People advise the president. He simply didn't listen. He says, we'll build it. So people look at some of all of these, and say, you brought it upon yourself somewhat. And Martin says, in other countries around us, they are not suffering as much when we trace their problem to the Ukraine and COVID.
That last bit that you made, I think I've heard my brother Martin make that point. I think that he's just been overly subjective. I don't know the last time he crossed the border to go to Togo. I have relatives there in Togo. He's never. You need to go to Togo and see the level of development there. So that matter, let's not get into it. It's cheap, populist political talk to say Togo. That there is no basis to compare Ghana and Togo. If you go to Togo and you hear him say that again, you tell him to stop it. Okay, the level of development in Togo, you compare that to Ghana, my brother probably knows Togo. So that matter, he should stop it. Now, the key issue you've made, which is the banking sector restructure. Now, you are faced with a choice. The NDC did the support that they're talking about, the alternative. You have many other options you can look at where they are throwing money at the problem. But the fundamental issue you had there was the sustainability of that program. The banks themselves were a shell. They didn't have the assets they say they had. Most of them, the assets they had were on paper. So that asset, if there was any day you were giving money to these banks, when it came to a point where depositors wanted their money, the banks did not have that. But what they have is just paper money. And that money cannot, or that assets they claim, they don't have it. So what you needed to do long-term, if you are planning long-term to sustain and consolidate and build your banking system, which of course your economy runs on, you have to take a drastic measure. So the option the government took was one that I think in the long term will begin to see the benefit. Now, the cost expended on the restructure, it's not a lost cost, it's not a lost expenditure, which is why the government in its accounting showed those to be below the line, and the situation we've been talking about, to say that it shouldn't be added to the national debt because these are recoverable, right? They are recoverable expense. But you needed to make the decision at a time to ensure that your banking sector does not collapse. So any day, I would say that this is the right way to go.
How many years? You have not recovered $1 billion.
But you are the lawyer. You should
25 billion. You have not recovered $1 billion, $1 billion Ghana cedis.
Yes, you are the lawyer. It takes so long, right? The wheels of justice grind very slowly, but the process is ongoing. And these individuals who are caught up in this, essentially will come to a point where when judgment comes, and Ghanaians will have to get whatever the court decides comes, would go to pay the debt.
Right. Alex, what do you say? The people pouring on the street. I actually saw someone, NDC, former MP, Ras Mubarak, and a couple of other people there.
Can I start off by saying good morning to both of you, and obviously to your viewers and listeners as well. I despair, even though I have hope for my country. Because the governments, I do not believe, still they haven't got it. They are actually playing down too much what is going on in the country at the moment. And yes, it is right to speak and try and paint a picture. But the big problem with the picture that they are painting is that the starting point is lack of accepting that they have played a part in where we are. This, if you go to AA, you're an alcoholic, you have a drink problem. The first thing they say to you is you cannot join us if you don't get up and say, I am an alcoholic. You take responsibility first. Then you're allowed to join. If not, go away because you're not going to help us. You must first accept that I have a problem. And every time you listen to government, it's about the Russian-Ukraine war and it's about COVID. But they didn't do anything wrong in getting us where we are. And that is why I despair. Because if you do not accept you have a problem and that you actually took part, somebody could have offered you the drink before, somebody could have doused it, but you must now accept that that is what I am and I need to solve the problem. they are not prepared to do that, then how do you bring everybody along? So you have this fundamental problem of lack of accountability by themselves. And you have even given narrations of what is going on. The government decided to take, I use local parlance, they played cha-cha with us, and it didn't work. You had all these policies you decided to come and implement. And you looked at the revenue you had been left behind and decided that it's doable. So you created 6 new regions. That's not cheap.
I've heard many refer to that as part of the reason that the government should begin to, look back and admit that it's been spending what it didn't have.
You've mentioned the banking crisis. 9 billion hole, 25 billion bigger hole. And the problem is not yet solved. And there were other ways of dealing with it. Get rid of all the management, getting people to look at the management, build the banks up a bit, merge them, and then begin to... It's happened in Nigeria. So there were ways of doing it. They chose that path they have taken. We are still in that hole. And some have taken them to court. We don't even know the outcome of those court cases. But some of the judgments are not in favor of government at the moment. So there are issues as to even the way and manner in which they've gone about it. Then you have flagship projects, which are basically very high on consumption and not on production. So we have had free SHS in our constitution all this time. And another person decided, I'll do it gradual. You made it a flagship project, I'll do it big bang. No problem. It's a good policy, it's in our constitution. Go ahead. But you didn't even cost it before you started. You were asked, even on BBC program, how much does it cost? You couldn't answer. So we are going to do. So you've done it. But why were you able to do all these things? Because you were the best, the luckiest government since Kwame Nkrumah, who walked into government and within 7 months, you have 2 oil wells gushing oil, and you're getting that revenue. It has never happened before in our history. So the total number of oil wells you inherit is 3. Apart from that, you're in a state where you can enter the Euro market and borrow because of the state of the economy. So you go into that. That is not enough for you to plan with. You start collateralizing state-funded issues. So you've collateralized, I think, the Common Fund, the District Assembly Common Fund. You've collateralized Get Fund to get more revenue. And the question is, what has this gone into at the moment that is giving production? Because if you have 100 factories, you can have 1 factory that will give you more revenue than all the 100 factories. So take Atwabu Gas. Look at the revenue that is giving us and the revenue we've saved. Look at KIA, Terminal 3. Look at the revenue that is giving us and that is bringing us back. So yes, we all have to spend. But you look at, you cut your coat according to your size. So for them to give this impression that, what is our problem, Samson? Simple terms. Our problem is our borrowing. Borrowing is a decision you take. Somebody took that decision. They took that decision. When they were in opposition, they accused us, quite rightly, that we are borrowing too fast, too quickly. It was done. In fact, it was used against us as being the basis for us even going to the IMF at that time. Things were not so bad then. So you've walked into a beautiful situation. And here we are now. And you are refusing to accept any responsibility whatsoever. It's COVID. This comparison of Togo, fine. You can do Togo. Togo is already relatively at the lower ebb. So let's take the macroeconomic figures, which they have. Take the macroeconomic of our neighboring countries. Then take the macroeconomic figures of the whole of Africa, so that we can say we are comparing like with like. I wouldn't even begin to argue about Togo. I'll be quiet. Because we are the West, in terms of the rates of depreciation.
We have followed the BBC, for example. They mentioned Ghana in the same breath as Sri Lanka and is it Ivory Coast? No, in one other country. So maybe we have company.
Everybody is being hit. That's why they can use COVID and to a certain extent, Russia and Ukraine. I'll ask Samson, if we were going to use mortality rate as the basis for measuring COVID, can we even begin to compare ourselves with Europe, America, and China? The number of thousands of people who have died in those countries, you can't even begin to say that Africa was in the same vein with COVID. But find out how many African countries got the kind of financial help that Ghana got during COVID. And their macroeconomic position is nowhere close to where we are. We are way at the bottom. So that is where I think that the starting point is where government has an issue. Now, you talk about the president's speech, which we will come on to maybe further, but there are very important issues that draw from here. You're in a situation. Two things need to be done. You have to increase revenue, or subsequently, or simultaneously, you have to reduce expenditure so that you actually converge. Increase your revenue, reduce expenditure. You haven't yet told us, or the people who need to hear, the IMF, people, why? We are now being told that the IMF negotiations may stall, our budget coming out. Why? Because the difficult, tough decisions you must make, you are now shying away from again. Because you may have to touch projects which you deem are your flagship projects, and therefore they cannot be touched. We have to continue with development. And we are in a ditch, and we've got a spade, and we are digging deeper, creating a bigger hole without a ladder. Samson, the whole issue, government must look at its expenditure, cut it drastically. Government must look at revenue generation, and then government, but first and foremost, government must accept that they have brought us where we are, and it is augmented by the nature of the way they promised.
Right. So I was mentioning that the BBC, in their reporting for a greater part, they mentioned Ghana, and who they compare us with is Sri Lanka and Sierra Leone, yes. Which many people feel really embarrassed about, that we should not be getting to that. So what do you say? What the Nana Must Go demonstration, the Kumipeku Reloaded, is that how to go about it? The global info analytics has done some, snap survey, and its survey shows that 54% of the respondents, so representing Ghanaians, 54% of Ghanaians support that the president should step down. 6% of those they surveyed didn't have an opinion, and 40% disagree that the president should step down.
Well, 54% for a president who had such high ratings at one point in his tenure is an indictment of his tenure. And I do not believe that if certain things don't happen in the short term, that number will go down. It will definitely go up. And it also depends on when you ask that question, what people have in their mind, because actually it's a political question in disguise. So if you are a diehard MPP person, you would definitely say, no, the president shouldn't go. I am clear that a statement is being made to government. The demonstration is in two parts. One, resign, and two, you're in breach of Article 69 in other departments, especially on the economic side. Resignation is real, and you've already given the example of other jurisdictions where that is the norm. If you get to a certain point, the thing you do is resign. Our structure is not like that. The funny thing about the resignation is that even if Nana resigned today, the reason why you hear the demonstrators asking for Bawumia to go and the rest of the cabinet to go so that the speaker can take over is that if even Nana resigned, then you're actually saying Bawumia should come and take over. And people are just saying like with like, no point. So if the two don't go, then what's the point of anybody going? That's a possible argument that people are looking at.
So, but you support their demand?
Oh yes, I think that if we had a structure that would allow us simply to go for an election tomorrow, it should be activated.
If there's a resignation,
yes,
or there is death,
yes,
or such other circumstance as removal,
yes,
in the manner they are asking for from Articles 60 and then 69,
yes,
what the Constitution provides for is that the Speaker takes over,
yes,
and there must be elections within 3 months.
yes.
We don't have money. Elections are expensive.
We have chosen to make elections expensive to the extent that they are. But at least you will boost confidence. You will boost confidence which is needed at this time in the international market. People will now begin to take Ghana seriously as trying to solve its problems. And that is one of the main drivers of why people are asking for the resignation of the finance minister. It's not that people have a personal issue with him or whatever. No. From the moment the finance minister said, for 3, 4, 5 months, we are never going to IMF, to the extent that even top hierarchy members in the party were shouting from the rafters, we are not going. 4, 5 days before, he said, we are not going to the IMF. From the moment he said, I'm going to the IMF, that day, resignation.
That happens elsewhere, not in Ghana.
But it would have given the needed boost to the IMF to know that we are serious. At the moment, why is it? They cannot tell you what to do. They will tell you what your hole is. And they will expect you to be able to say, we are going to take hard measures.
Okay. Right. But Richard, as far as you are concerned, and we need to take a break here, as far as you are concerned, this is misplaced. They shouldn't be doing this.
The demonstration. The
demand of the demonstrators.
No. They don't have a sound basis for it. I mean, you read the law. Everything they're saying, if we look at the economic numbers, which I've taken time to work down here, comparing NDC and MPP in the last 8 years, like 16 years, and if you see, if this economic performance is any basis to want to say that get a president out of office, then we are looking at the NDC in their own time having to do that. But that's not what this is about. This is about, in the moment of crisis, try to solve the problem. You see, my brother was very crafty in saying that if we were to measure the impact of COVID in terms of how many people died, how about measure it in terms of the impact it's had on economies, which we are seeing globally? That's where the measurement is, right? So the question of the government having done anything untoward is not substantiated by the economic data. You looked at even in 2017 when this government came, grew on average 7% up until 2019 when COVID happened. In 2020, went down, economic growth went down to 0.51%. Now, immediately in 2021, you saw there was an increase in growth by 5.36%, right? And this year, 2022, first quarter returns about 3.8, second quarter about 4.8, which shows you that the economy is recovering. The issue we have now, Samson, if we are being very candid, all the economic professors who have come to talk, if they will be very candid to the facts, are global in nature, where our economy is largely import-driven, right? And so when you see the government's negotiations with the IMF, one of the key planks in there is trying to engineer a structural reform of our economy. That must be done. Way back when NDC Part 1 was there, NDC Part 2, we've been having this conversation in our country that the nature and structure of our economy is largely informal. That must be done. NDC was in power 8 years. That wasn't done. We're still here. We came here. In 2017, the purposes of trying to do that were looking toward digitalization. You see that agenda forcefully being pushed. You see today, the Ghana card situation has been done, and we're continuously going to make sure every Ghanaian has their card. It's toward a structuring our economy. What is called the 10 numbers. Now you can trace, you can have every Ghanaian having their TIN number. Initially, before the Ghana card came, that was the drive. Now everybody's Ghana card will become their TIN number. So you are gradually bringing an envelope around the citizenry to see that at a glance, you can see everybody within the economic space, and you'll be able to purpose your tax instrument to be able to capture everyone.
What do you say to those who are now playing back Akufo-Addo's own words to him. In 2015, in December, he asked President Mahama to resign, that he had failed. He should resign. We also had, what's the name? In 2016, he himself has said, try me. And if I don't measure up, kick me out. He said it himself. Nobody asked him to say that.
I don't think I heard the president say, kick me out.
Yeah, he said so. It is in his tweets. That's being said all over the place, yes. If you like, I'll just show you one. I'm looking at one here. Okay. And then you are familiar with AFAG, right? Yeah. Yes, Alliance for Accountable Governance, which I think was set up by the present Attorney General, Godfrey Dame. In 2014, also said, ask Mahama to resign or face their wrath. So people are telling you what Martin and his friends are doing is nothing new. And if anything at all, the president has asked for it before. Your groups have also done it before, except that they didn't hit the streets. Yeah, and so something. So I have not contradicted that position. I didn't say that what they are doing is meaningless. I say they have a basis in democracy, which is part of the expression, but they don't have any sound basis in law to demand that. And when it was said during the NDC time, did he resign? People had a right to have their political expression. They've done that. So beyond that, that's what it must end to be. So, but the key thing for me, which is different in this case, is that there's an appearance, my brother Kpebu is going on a certain emotive tangent, and where I find it almost destabilizing in its conversation to incite the population against the person of the president, against the person of the finance minister, against the vice president. It is almost personal. Your own MPs, 95 of them, came out demanding that the finance minister be removed. That was not an incitement. But no, they made a democratic statement to say that, yes, it's our right, we feel that he must go, that's fine. But if you listen to Martin Kpebu, the conversation he's having is toxic. It's toxic. They made a statement and made their demand, we want this, and this is our response if it's not done. They spoke about conflict of interest that Ken Ofori-Atta and his deputy find themselves in. Martin Kpebu talks about the conflict of interest. He speaks about data bank benefits. Is that what you say is incitement? But Samson, you know Martin Kpebu is a lawyer, and a good one at that. If he has basis, why doesn't he take this to court? Let's examine that. I think that would be material. Must everybody be going to court over everything they are displeased about? No, I'm saying, yes, of course. A strong lawyer like him, right? I think there's this historic case that he's done to do with bail or something like that. He's done many. Many. But this one was critical. It was a very innocuous issue. He took it. Now he's established serious precedent for all of us. I'm saying that if he thought there was material evidence in this, to say the finance minister has conflicted himself in a manner that the law should frown on, why hasn't because that is a much easier. You're suggesting Akufo-Addo, who was known for doing a lot of human rights cases and so on, should have been going to court rather than going through a Kumipreku demonstration? I'm not saying that. I'm saying in particular instance. You are putting me into a different situation. I'm talking particularly about what is before us, right? So lawyer Martin Kpebu, good lawyer, serious allegation. Why don't you take it to court? He's allowed by the Constitution. Yes, of course. He's allowed by the Constitution. He can do both. I have not denied that. Free expression. So he can make. I've not denied that. I've not denied that. There are people who make the decision that I won't go to court because maybe I'm not comfortable that what decision I'll get to the court will even facilitate what I want. But as a lawyer, you shouldn't say so because the law deals with evidence. We're entitled.
But before he's a lawyer, he's a citizen of the country.
Hold on, no. So, Senior, I have not denied his democratic right to demonstrate. Yes. But I'm only saying that as a good lawyer that he is, he should make a rational decision of what gives him the best outcome he's seeking. Right? So if it is to say that the finance minister has corrupted himself by being in a situation of conflict of interest, that law can address that issue. You know, I would have a problem. You know Ace Ankuma? I do. You know Occupy Ghana? Exactly. You know that as we speak, almost on a daily basis or weekly basis, they are writing letters to the president making demands on the Galamsey fight. They are writing letters. They are not going to court. Ace Ankuma's law will sink a ship. So that's what he's doing. So I'm saying that. So you're saying that. So that option they should ignore and then just go make noise. That I'm saying that it's an option. They'll choose to take it or not to take it. I'm saying it's good he's taking a democratic route, which is fine. But if he feels strongly about it, he should also use the law.
Well,
my only question to you is that what he is doing does not stand for me in the Constitution to say that he has a basis in the Constitution. Because if he did, he would have gone to court.
Right, thank you very much. And we'll take a break. And as you know, the Kumi Preko Reloaded demonstration is actually now sort of warming up as they make us understand. And the hashtag is Nana Must Go. And they are continuing. They say that among their demands, they have listed a few things. I'll just read a couple of them to you before we go on a break. They have listed a number of things. They say that the president's mismanagement of the economy has brought Ghanaians severe hardship. They quote the currency, they quote fuel prices, astronomical, unprecedented. They say the president and his cronies are living ostentatiously and arrogantly and have no sense of sympathy for the ordinary citizen. They talk about Land Cruisers and motorcades that he continues to use, many of them even in the era of what you should see as austerity. 3, they say the president is supervising an incompetent team and refuses to make changes, even when his own MPs request that he should do so. He will not sack Oforiata and he will not reshuffle. They state that. Number 4, the president is engaging in wasteful spending and misplaced priorities. They say he's spending on a cathedral. He's spent 34 million to rent private jets so he can bath in the skies. 5, the president is supervising growing insecurity and violence against citizens and the country. Then they mention a number of things, including his inability to protect us against Galamsey. And Occupy Ghana says, and other people say that the man who is associated with the president and his party, the chairman of the party in the Ashanti region, Chairman Wuntumi, whose company has been found to be doing illegal stuff in the forest, should be a best example to use to stop this. And finally, they say the president and his cronies have profited from our misfortune. They mention Galamsey, they mention Data Bank, among other issues. Now, their demands, they say that he and his vice should resign or they should be impeached and the speaker take over. Then there should be a convening of a transitional government of national unity. There should be a new constitution that favors the people and direct elections for MMDCEs, and among other things. And to lead Parliament to pass a law to make it mandatory for every appointee to appear before Shraj to justify their assets in accordance with Article 286. We take a break. When we return, tell us what you feel about the President's address on Sunday. Bright Simmons begins that discussion with us with a presentation. We'll be right back.
That all these things have been factored into the present formula now, and yes, we still find ourselves where we are now. Tell you something horrific. A few days ago, I went to the garage, pumped the fuel into the car, and the bloke came up and gave me a bill. It was almost a third world war at the garage, at the station. Why is he giving me this? He said just yesterday the price of diesel. The price of super moved to what the price of diesel used to be. Diesel is now 20 whatever. I was about complaining to a colleague in the profession a day after, and he said to me, don't worry about that. It's going to go to 23 this evening. And it's a particularly difficult situation. What is it that led to this? What is to be done? It's a difficult situation. And nobody, I don't particularly envy the lot of those who are really having to juggle. What do we do? Is the what do you call it? Is that the elephant in the room? It's the elephant in the room. Normally you don't mention it, but we are mentioning it. So I'm not sure what really is the elephant. But it's a difficult thing.
Instead of 4 days, we come like 2 days in a week. in order to be able to save on the amount of money we are using for fuel. Because, Mr. Speaker, the day before yesterday, I went to the Gold filling station at Lagos. My light was on, and I asked them to fill my tank. I got down to the shop to buy something. When I came back, 3,000 cedis was my bill. 3,000, Mr. Speaker. I had 2,100. I had to call my colleague, Honorable Jaja, to send me money through the Momo that I'm avoiding to use before I was able to pay my bills.
When we are in dire circumstances, that is when we are called upon to increase productivity. And for a member of parliament to say that we should work in just 2 days in a week, the Speaker, that is a very apocalyptic declaration from the member of parliament. What will be the effect on national productivity, this call that you are making? And what will be the effect on GDP? I think that really is an unfortunate call on us.
You're welcome back. This is Newsfile. It's your most authoritative news analysis platform. And here on Newsfile, we put Ghana first. It's brought to you by Bank of Africa's strongest group and closest partner, MTN. Everywhere you go. Star Assurance, your solid partner. Ashesi University, educating ethical and entrepreneurial leaders for Africa. Robert & Sons Optical Services, your comprehensive eye care service provider for 31 years. Duroplus, where Duroplus goes, water flows. And you need to know that how water gets to you matters. Always remember, Duroplus is how you get it safest. St. Thomas Eye Hospital, providing excellence in eye care. Hoptel, everything you. Miwe Insurance, dial *165# on the MTN to join. And Magdan Aviation, your dependable private aviation requests solved. Now, like I told you, we are going to the segment where we are going to analyze the president's speech, but we want you to tell us also what you thought the president missed or what you felt very excited about the president's speech. At this point, the president is calling all of us to collective action to rescue the economy, and that is where we should all be. And like President Mahama said, no time for gloating, time to pick up the pieces and work. Just a few messages here. This one from Malik, and he says that the unprecedented demand on the majority for the removal of Ken is the clearest indication of a vote of no confidence in the president and his leadership. If your MPs publicly ask you to do what they feel is right, it means they trust that you are capable of doing that on your own. Is that not what is right? I hope I get that correctly. And then Richmond says, what is global about our debt choices that we have made? Over 55% made of foreign denomination, which crowds out the little revenue anytime the cedi depreciates. What is global about our decision to pile up our own expenditure, with government machinery taking up over 40% of total compensation expenditure when we are not generating same from the abysmal machinery? What is global about spending over 600 million on planting for foods, which has not generated a similar value for a moment like this? The greatest challenge this government has is its inability to see the reality of the causation of the actions and inactions to where we are. Until then, it will get worse. And Ken says that, do we need problems to be rationalized or fixed? Anyway, Richard, the measurement of the economy is not based on the president's judgment, but the impact of the people. The people say pain is being inflicted on them. And Richard says, what? So our professors who teach our folks to become Fourier tests are no more good simply because MPP is in power? Oh no. Musa Abator says, I support hashtag Nana must go because within a short period, the cedi has depreciated by over 62% against the US dollar, ultimately sending Dr. Bawumia into economic comatose. Hence, he can't speak about the economy anymore, and the space which goods and service, the space at which goods and services are going up suggests that Akufo-Addo is clueless and super incompetent. Hence, he cannot help the nation. Couple of you, some more messages, but let's go and hear these brains and return. There are actually some who are suggesting that the president presently is a lame duck president, even if it's not constitutionally, morally, he's lost it because his own MPs say what they do represents a vote of no confidence in him. Let's begin analyzing the president's address to the nation. And that one too, there was a Global Info Analytics, survey, Snap opinion poll that was done about it. And the president scored very poorly as against the speech that was delivered by John Mahama. Why is that so? Do the experts agree? We begin with Bright Simmons, Honorary Vice President, Imani, Africa. He had a tall write-up, very incisive, and he joins us to begin the conversation. Bright, thank you very much for your patience, and thank you for your commitment to the democratic project. Please, let's hear you.
Thank you very much, Samson. And we would like to commend Newsfile for these opportunities that you continually give us to present research that very often we're not able to circulate as widely as we wish. That's particularly those of us from the civil society wing that also tends to conduct policy analysis. So we appreciate this, and we're very grateful for the opportunity.
Thank you.
As you rightly pointed out, the president gave a seminal speech. He's been quiet about the economic crisis in ways that have been quite surprising. He's not really given a major speech since October 2021 on the economy, even though we've seen significant ups and downs. So this was a major speech, and the purpose of this short presentation is to try and analyze it from the point of view of those of us in civil society that are focused on policy analysis. I start off with a little kind of framing. We have a situation in Ghana which can be akin to high fever. The country is seriously heated, and we've been seeing fairly crazy things happen to the currency, to inflation and people's living standards and the likes of it. The president is cast in the mold of a doctor. He's a senior doctor. He has the executive authority to try and fix all our problems. So the doctor comes in to do a diagnosis. And the way these things typically go, the diagnosis is the starting point, right? You have to get it right. And I think Honorable Segbefia in your studio mentioned that point, which is a very critical point. The diagnosis is central. Why are we where we are? Then that gives you a sense of where things will go. That's the prognosis. And the treatment is based on having a view to both the prognosis and the most optimal treatment available. So unless we get the diagnosis right, why is Ghana in such high fever? The prognosis will also be questionable. But if the prognosis is questionable, we have doubts that the treatment will be any better. My primary concern with the president's speech is very similar to what you have said, to what Honorable Segbefia has said, to what my very good friend Kofi Bentel has said, and my colleague at Imani has said, and others have said. But the slight emphasis that I want to make is to go beneath the numbers and try and work out why it is that the president is being misconceived on this matter. Secondly, the president does admit that a lot of things have to be done. But when you look at why we are where we are, he does not admit that primarily his policies are a major contributory factor. That's a key issue. Are his policies a major contributory factor? He insists that the jolts that has hit the economy, the shocks, are entirely external. He does admit that we have to do certain things different and improve and the rest of it. But as to why we are where we are, he does not accept that his policies are primarily responsible. So that's the first point. He also does not believe that, as far as, given the fact that he doesn't believe that his policies are concerned, it is his policies that must change going forward. And those are very critical elements. He thinks we are also not that worse off compared to our neighbors. That's the key insight that I drew from the speech. The key concerns that I have about the speech is that he does not think that his policies are a primary contributor, and because he doesn't believe in that, he suggests other measures that are not related particularly to his policy. They may be related to the structure of the economy or to things like that, but not to his policies. And then he also thinks that Ghana is not that worse off. This is a problem that affected all countries the same way. Those are the key issues that I need us to probe carefully. And because we have thematic points that are very important in this discussion, I will go in that same fashion. So I'll start with inflation, then touch on depreciation and debt restructuring and things like that. On inflation, to buttress his point, he mentions Senegal. And then he says, look, Senegal has seen its inflation rate grow by 11 times. And Ghana has seen only 5 times. So we must be better than Senegal. As a presidential speech or for a presidential speech, accuracy, the quality of the analysis is extremely important because we assume that the president has access to the best talent in the land. The most serious analyst in the land must be available to the president. You cannot write a speech in which there are major errors because it raises questions about the capacity that is available in the president's office to do the right management and to do the right oversight and to do the right analysis to solve our problems. So I simply went and checked. And it appears that they picked up one single inflation number for a particular month, compared it to one particular inflation number in another month a year before, and they concluded. But that's not how you do it. If you want to look at the trend of inflation, you look at, and you want to compare what it was in 2019 with 2022, you look at average inflation for both years, and then you compare. It's a very elementary point. And if you do that, inflation in Senegal has not increased by 11 times. It's increased, but by 4 times. More importantly, because it's at 7.5, it's still below the 10%, which means that it's still in single digits, and therefore the effect of prices is not very significant. Let me give you an example. If you bought something for 100 cedis in Senegal in 2018, in 2019, the price may have gone up to 102 cedis, 102 CFA. This is just a rough example. In today's terms, it will have gone up to about 107.5 CFA. So if you are a citizen, the effect, while important in statistical terms, is not as crazy as if, in comparison with if you were in Ghana and you bought something at 100 cedis in 2019, and that now has gone up to 137 Ghana cedis. So the absolute numbers matter a lot in inflation, which is why we try to keep it within single digits, not just in number of multiple jumps that occur within a band, but particularly below single digit. And in Ghana, we have an 8% benchmark or 8% target. If you are 37%, you are about 30% above your benchmark. If you are in Senegal, where the Central Bank of Wayemu has about a 3% target, and you do 7.5%, you are very much within range. So that is important. On top of that, Senegal is growing, and Senegal has a direct exposure to Ukraine and Russia because massive imports come from that country, those countries or that area of the world into Senegal. When you look at the 20 countries in Africa that are most exposed to both Ukraine and Russia in terms of imports, in terms of trade and investment and the like, Ghana is not on that list, the top 20 countries. Then he goes to Togo, and I think Mr. Ahiaba has made points about whether Togo is developed or not. I don't think that is the analysis. The analysis is whether or not cost of living in Togo is worse now than before. And here too is the same point. The president makes a massive miscalculation by taking one inflation number in a particular month, another inflation month, the year of reference, which is 2019, and then strike some balance and say it's increased by 16 times. And that is not correct either. Togo's inflation rate of about 5.6% averagely this year is still within single digits. And more important than that, because of the same analysis that I made, if you start off with 1% and you go to 5%, while the multiplicity might be similar to what we are seeing in Ghana, the fact that it was so low, the inflation rate was so low, means that you have more room to let it grow a little bit without impacting prices and making people suffer. So somebody who was buying something at 100 CFA 3 years ago, 2019, in Togo, and now having to spend 105 or 106 CFA, it's much better off than somebody who was spending 100 cedis in 2019 and now having to spend 140 cedis or 137 cedis. That is the right analysis that you have to make. And I think that as president, we expect that the degree of accuracy, factual integrity, etc., that his speech must have cannot be gainsaid. It's really critical because it goes to credibility of his office. It goes to credibility of the strategies and the policies that he's pushing. Let's go back to the analysis around which we've already had in the studio, and I'm just using this diagram to illustrate. Suppose you take a number of countries in Africa, and you say all of us have been hit the same way by COVID-19 and Ukraine. So the wrecking ball you see at the bottom of the screen is COVID-19 and Ukraine hitting all of us. We all started at different places. You can see that already Ghana was fairly high, right, in 2019 compared to some of these other countries in inflation terms. Even on currency depreciation, in some instances, we were worse off than some of the countries in 2019. But notice the spring that is beneath Ghana. So Ghana is the red ball that you see on the right. It represents a lot of issues that we are compressing. Now, when the COVID shock and the Ukraine shock hits all of us, you see that two things will happen. Depending on where you already were, you will move up in proportion. So if Ghana's situation was already problematic, it will go up by, say, the same proportion. But if Ghana was also, in addition, suppressing a number of other vulnerabilities or hiding a number of other vulnerabilities, then the spring will on call and to go up even higher than it will have gone proportionally. So on both score, the fact that in 2019 we're already more vulnerable, because if you look at things like inflation, exchange rate depreciation, and debt service to GDP, how much of our total income do we spend on our debt? If you look at all those numbers, we're already worse than most of our neighbors in 2019. And I'm talking about the vulnerabilities. I'm not talking about things like growth, which is prospect for the economy and things like that. In those kind of things, we're better than a lot of our neighbors. But in terms of vulnerabilities, how much debt we've piled up, how much of our total money we used to spend on debt, how much is our inflation, how much is our currency vulnerability. When you take those things, that gives you vulnerability as opposed to prospect or as opposed to potential. You need to distinguish the two. When you focus on vulnerability, Ghana was worse in 2019 than most of our countries, most of our neighbors and our peers. So when COVID hits, naturally you'll be raised, or rather things will worsen in proportion to your vulnerability. That's the first point of analysis. The second point of analysis is that on top of that, things you've suppressed will unwind. And I'll mention a few of them. So that's the proper way to look at why the situation in Ghana is worse than the situation in other countries. And in a short period of time, we have shown that the situation in Ghana is worse, on a point of view of vulnerabilities, as well as the current impact on cost of living because of the high inflation rate and the fact that that high inflation rate has gone up even further. So we now go to what is this spring? What is it that Ghana was sitting on that COVID hit and then it unwound? It started from a lot of wasteful spending. Some of our procurement prices are the worst I have seen in Africa. And when you look at the degree to which we use non-competitive tendering, some of the countries that we claim are not democratic countries, and therefore we lord over them, and we think we are so high and mighty, do better than us on competitive tendering. Go to Uganda and compare the number of procurement activities that are pure competitive tendering versus Ghana, how often we use single source and non-competitive tendering and things like that. Look at the extent to which fiscal anchors are observed. Look at the proportion or the degree to which budget implementation is monitored and obeyed, or rather complied with, compared to Ghana, where we are constantly off track our budget implementation. Education and health, often 30 to 40% off track in terms of spending. Compared to the other countries in Africa, and look at that, the quality of the fiscal management, that's what we've seen in Ghana over the last couple of years. And you'll be quite surprised. So you have wasteful spending, or at least spending that's not very efficient. When you do that, you have fiscal deficit because your expenditure is much higher than your revenue, which we all know in this country. We have an expenditure of about 130 something billion this year. We can only raise about 75 billion or 80 billion. That 50 billion that we cannot raise in revenue, we must borrow. So naturally, your debt will keep piling up. When your debt keep piling up that way, you create other factors around servicing. So you're spending so much of your money paying the debt that you regenerate some of the initial problems around the fiscal deficit. And then on top of that, and as I will show very soon, you create concerns about the direction of your economy. You start to see investor flights. You start to see money being printed in different ways. So I'm using it metaphorically. Money can be printed in different forms. The central bank can buy government bonds. It can do some of these repo transactions that it's currently been doing that few of us understand what exactly is going on. But it does a number of things that expands its balance sheet. But because the central bank is not very productive, it has, 3 or so companies that it owns. They don't really produce very much, gifts and the likes. So if you take the balance sheet of the central bank, most of that is generated by creating money through various schemes. Now, creating money like that will obviously spur inflation. That will lead to depreciation because, in a way, depreciation and inflation are price movements of a different type. Depreciation is really very much the price, the CD itself as a price, losing value. And inflation is the price of most other things losing value. And they are very intertwined. If you have spirals of inflation and depreciation in that fashion, you're going to have economic decline, and it's going to turn right back up. So you have these cycles of vulnerability that becomes the spring on which our situation is sitting. And when you have a shock, it expands the problem. So that is the real analysis that I think the president is missing. The fact of the matter is that by the time the president spoke, Ghana's inflation was the worst in the region, only better than the likes of Sudan and Zimbabwe. Sudan is having serious fragility issues, serious insecurity issues. Zimbabwe has had an economic collapse for the last 2 decades. It's surprising that the president went to find a few countries that have very low inflation and therefore have room to increase inflation a little bit when they have a crisis, as opposed to comparing it to countries that have similar inflation to us usually, like Nigeria, Kenya, Uganda, and Zambia. When you look at all of those countries, our situation is the worst, including having the worst performing currency in the world, not in Africa. Take Zambia, which also had issues to do with debt and things like that, and the government took a very firm, bold decision. They didn't even get an IMF program for more than 3 years of chasing. But they were committed to their own fiscal consolidation program. And you realize that even though inflation shot up to 22% in 2021 in Zambia, it's now down to 9.9% today. And that is notwithstanding Ukraine war and all of that, because the policy methods were being reported. And then you do see the Songa advisory report that I'm sure you've seen shows that some of those factors, like the fact that our currency is worse, etc., means that even when prices are global and therefore inflation is imported, we still have problems more than other countries. So, for instance, fuel is bought on the global market. Ukraine, Russia has definitely increased the price of fuel. There's no doubt about that. Why is it not uniform across the region? It's not uniform across the region, and Ghana has the highest diesel prices. And petrol now, because of the recent increases, we are now also the highest in terms of petrol. We were number 3 before in June when Songa Advisory did this analysis. We are now the highest. If you add that to diesel, we are now the highest in fuel prices generally. Why is that the case? The case is because in our case, we have other vulnerabilities like exchange rate and the rest hitting you. And that's why it's very important when we are doing the analysis that we are very contextual in the way we look at it. What caused this, my argument, and the argument of a lot of people in the civil society movement, particularly those that are in policy analysis, is that a lot of it is policy failure. And that policy failure can be seen in different ways. So when you think of it, in 2021, despite COVID, despite the fact that the global economic conditions were very tight, the government went to the market, and the market gave the government $3 billion. Why? Did the market not know about COVID? COVID and all of that. The market knew, but the government went to paint a very interesting story and got $3 billion. The problem was that it then went back around August, trying to raise another $2 billion. And then when it was, the signals that it was getting was that no, people are beginning to get concerned about why are you raising so much money. It dropped it down to $1.5 billion, but refused to withdraw at that point and kept pushing. That also made analysts, curious, and they started to investigate. So if you begin to look at the bad press that Ghana started getting among international financial analysts, you will see a big tick up around September, October of last year, where we failed to raise that $1.5 billion and abandoning that roadshow. Fascinatingly, we did not discuss it a lot in Ghana, but it was a huge dent on our credibility. And that was entirely the decision of the government to get Ghana into that cycle, into that trap of bad press and analyst scrutiny that is not favorable. Because you've raised $3 billion. The world is facing serious capital market tightening. People are trying to cut their quota according to the size. And then you go back to the market trying to raise even more. In a time when you know people are becoming a bit jittery about the global economy. So you see that there is a sudden sell-off in our bonds, beginning in September, when it became clear that the market will not give us the money, through October and November. And by the time we hit January of 2022, the bonds were being thrown all over the place. So the argument that this has something to do with Ukraine is kind of laughable, because COVID, we got the money when COVID was ravaging the world. We got the $3 billion. And by the time our bond sell-off began, Ukraine war has not started. You can see the numbers on the screen yourself. And everybody can go and check the Bloomberg terminals and other source of information. And you will see that massive sell-off in our bonds is what caused the ratings downgrade in February of 2022 and destroyed our international capital markets reputation. That's policy. On top of that, when countries were being warned that because of these tightening conditions, you may not be able to raise money and you may have issues servicing your debt. Here is a global program. All countries that feel they will have vulnerabilities come so that we will suspend the interest rates you pay. They Ghana say no, we won't touch it. We won't touch it. Therefore, we are too proud, I don't even know what the argument was. But we already knew that these pressures were building up in our economy, and therefore, if we had an opportunity like this, which kind of give you room not to appear as if you are defaulting, but it's prices driven and it gives you cover, you say, I won't do it. So Ghana refused in that same November 2021, after it's failed in the capital markets to raise that money, to do the DSSI. And a lot of analysts became very curious. We started getting another round of bad press. What is wrong with this country? That is what led investor flight, the beginning of the investor flight. Because it appeared as if we're not on top of the sound decisions we must be making if our policy positions are to be taken as credible. So it's like, is the country being managed properly? What are these sort of decisions? If you think of it that way, then you say, okay, is it possible that these vulnerabilities are just structural to our economy in the sense that it's always been the case? Yes, there is some degree to it, it's always been the case, but it's got worse. It's got worse over time. This is a graph of our fiscal deficit, how often our expenditure exceeds our revenue. And you see that it started widening from when we got oil, but it went through the roof in 2017. It went through the roof in 2017. And that is very, very, very significant. The other point that we also have to make is that because the debt growth, how much our debt is growing, has two components, the external and the domestic. Sometimes we get a bit confused about how the dynamics are playing out. For many years, for about 2 decades, our local debts, how much we borrow from Ghanaians and banks and things like that, never crossed 25% of GDP. It fluctuated always around that level. At one point, by 2019, it had hit almost 50%. It means that relatively, we're starting to put a lot of the risk within Ghana. But the reason why that was possible was because we're also borrowing large amount of dollars. So the crowding out effect that we knew in the late 90s were no longer being felt. Because in the late 90s, we knew if we go and borrow a lot of treasury bills and borrow a lot on the domestic market, you have a crowding out effect, prices will rise, it will have an effect around the economy. And we're very, very, very common in Ghanaian policy discourse to warn about the government not borrowing too much in the local market. The reason why we're able to do it and shift the relative amount we borrow so much, so we move from something in the region of about domestic debt of 66 billion to a situation where now it's over 200 billion. The reason why that massive shift in 2017 to now was not being felt in the economy was simply because we also get about $6 billion per annum, the largest increase in Eurobonds we've seen ever. It moved from about total Eurobonds being about 3.5 billion to 4 billion towards the end of 2016 when we got our last raise, to a situation where we are now around $13 billion plus, right? So that massive inflation meant, therefore, that because there was a lot of forex, it was somehow counterbalancing. I'm being very crude at economics here. It was counterbalancing. Now, in that sense, you could do a lot of crowding out in the domestic markets, and it will not feed through to inflation and exchange rate depreciation in the way that in the late 90s we used to see. Because in the late 90s, we didn't have massive injections of Eurobond and the rest.
All right.
Now that we've, the Eurobond effect waned off, it's like a steroid, and it's waned off, we're having serious challenges in both inflation and depreciation for that same factor. And then on top of all these things that I've told you about, the government started to reinforce it with policies such as e-levy, which was an interesting idea when it started, but needed very careful thinking through about what it meant in respect of our overall taxation policy with respect to digital, which GRA was doing. So GRA had got this support from the United Kingdom and was studying that a lot of the economy was becoming digitalized. How do we get more money out of it? And then it was rushed out before that process was properly concluded and proper policy measures could be put out. And the way it was designed was a sentiment dampener. Because it was a sentiment dampener, most of us predicted at that time that we should watch the inflation rate and we should watch the cross effect on consumption taxes. It's not about whether or not they will get the revenue that they were hoping for, because we all knew they wouldn't, and we published that they wouldn't. Every serious analyst in Ghana published that they will never raise that money that they were saying they will raise, because other countries have tried it all around the region. Some have even abandoned e-levy and the rest, because it doesn't seem to generate enough money for some reason. A lot of it due to a very complex factors that I can't explain here. So we knew it didn't raise the money, but we also felt that if it wasn't designed properly, it would have huge impact on inflation. And the government refused to listen.
All right.
When you look at the numbers around our depreciation history, the trajectory of the depreciation of the currency and the inflation rate, you will see that on the left is inflation. A lot of the problems started around that February to March when they were insistent on passing e-levy and sentiment was worsening. And it is from that time on that the trajectory takes a massive uplift. Same with the city situation. So clearly, all of those things were causing investors to lose confidence in the economy, was causing a lot of business people to feel that they need to hold back their money.
Until we got shut out of the Eurobond market.
Yes, we got shut out of the Eurobond market, but don't forget that we have been shut out of the Eurobond market since November 2021, right? The argument I'm making is that we have sudden jumps, not the same level, because otherwise we'll have seen a sudden jump in October 2021 when we couldn't raise the money when we went to the Eurobond market. Remember that we went to the Eurobond market in in August, trying to sound out the market. And around September, tried to raise money. And around October, realized we couldn't raise the money and abandoned it. That was 2021, October thereabouts. My argument is that we didn't see a sudden movement immediately, though the bond sell-off began, but it worsened when e-levy and things like that, and the fact that the government couldn't pass its budget because it wouldn't compromise on e-levy, created massive concerns about investors about the direction of the economy. And then on top of that, the government continued to press on with the e-levy thing, and therefore reinforced the view that investors had that we had turbulent times upwards, and everything then went through the roof. You will also see that just this year, around August, we started to feel pressures in the currency. It wasn't as bad as it is now, right? The government then said it's all speculation and started to mount a manner of disparate policies, disjointed policies, because all of it was speculation and demand was not the big problem, structural demand was not the big problem. And he went to the Council of State and assured the Council of State that this was all about speculation, they have got it handled. The market look and listens and watches and observes, and you see a little lag. And then as soon as September, things started to build up and investors started to see that, no, actually people are trying to repatriate money because investors want to leave our city bonds and they want their money out and they're not getting the dollars from the bank. People are trying to import and they're struggling. They say, no. This government is not diagnosing the problem properly. And therefore, I don't...
Bryce, we have done some 25 minutes and we need...
3 more minutes. And let me just wrap up. 3 more minutes.
Okay, please go ahead.
And so when that happened, you see that investors give them a little briefing space and then it shoots up all of a sudden again. So what I'm trying to explain is that there is a lot of policy misdiagnosis, and the policy misdiagnosis leads to people being concerned about the quality of the policy management and the economic policy management, and therefore they don't think things are going to get better. And that's when you see this speculation hedging issue that we've been talking about.
Okay.
The government blames speculation. Speculation is just the wrong way to look at it. Speculators are primarily trying to make money. They're trying to make profit. They believe that the cedi will fall or rise, and therefore I need to hold up on one, go long on one and go short on the other, and I'll make money. The problem is, if it was only speculation as opposed to rational actors not trusting that things will be better in the future and therefore flying to safety, we will see different behaviors. That every time it was likely that their predictions are not holding, speculators will dump back the dollar, and the strengthening will be long-standing because now they know they can't easily make money. Because most of the problems are hedging related, and therefore people are making decisions that are very rational. And the fact also that the structural demand problem holds, because a lot of the so-called speculation, they talk about the black market, which is a street market issue, is Forex Bureau overflow. And Forex Bureau is just 1.2% of the overall Forex market. The bulk of the market is in the banks. And the bulk of the banking transactions are business related. People making real business decisions. You cannot blame speculation and black market for something that is not speculation and black market and expect investors not to see through that and not to anticipate. On top of that, the government anticipated all of this because when it was going to issue its 2020 Euro bonds, it had to disclose all the economic vulnerabilities. And it clearly said that it expects that its debt servicing costs and the rest will go through the roof, and therefore there are risks associated with the bond. This has nothing to do with COVID because COVID had not yet come, and this has nothing to do with Ukraine. So go and read the government's own prospectus that it used to raise funds. On top of all of this, as I've said, the central bank is dramatically expanding its balance sheet, creating more money in inverted commerce, and creating more inflationary spirals. It would mean, therefore, that we cannot trust the government's prognosis because they are not diagnosing the problem properly. And if we cannot trust the government's prognosis, then we come to the issue of the debt restructuring. Because a lot of the debt restructuring logic is anchored on the way the government has defined the problem. First and foremost, the president's promise that by 2028 we'll bring down debt to GDP to 55% from the almost over 100% that it currently hovers. It's not really a response to any serious issue because a debt restructuring is not about how first of all, there's an event first before we can think of the process. There must be a period in which you default, and that default can be simply you announce that you restructure, or there's a real default where you say I can't pay. They are similar. Now, that default or that restructuring announcement is a period in time. The question is what happens after that period in time is what is most important, is whether or not you will get enough relief so that going forward from that time onwards, the pressures in your economy abate. That's so critical. My argument is when you look at the analysis that has been done in 2021, it's not too long ago, by the Ministry of Finance itself and by the IMF, none of the projections shows that we'll be able to reduce debt to GDP significantly. And this is the Ministry of Finance's own analysis about where we are likely to be in 2025, which is about 87% and things like that. This is the IMF's own projection, which shows that by 2025, this is where the fiscal deficit will be. This is the projection also of how much external service to debt service to GDP will be, etc.
Okay.
All of those things tell us that this notion that we can do 55%, very recent. And we don't yet have the track record.
Right, if we could terminate it here, and then I would like you to hold on for us. I may come back with you with just some very quick questions. So, very sorry we had to interrupt, but we've done some 30 plus minutes, and this has been very, very interesting. Bright has been presenting on Ghana in intensive care, and he's made some statements and assertions that clearly puts things in very bad light. Inflation in Senegal has gone up, but by 4 times and not 11 times, as the president asserted in his address on Sunday. What's he going to do about that? Inflation in Togo, 2019-2022, has gone up, yes, but by 8 times and not 16 times, as asserted by the president. This, if it remains what it is, I don't know what it does to the credibility of the president. Ghana had weak shock absorbers, he says, and that accounts for what he calls the spring of doom, bouncing far higher than has been seen in other countries like Togo and Nigeria, and so on. And we see what he shows us. Fuel prices, Ghana at the apex, worse, selling fuel at such prices that it's no more affordable. bad signals of these situations started sometime in September 2021. He showed us the sovereign analysis. November 2021, he shows us the story about the mess that is blamable on Ghana's refusal to join the pandemic debt suspension scheme. And then he talks about the debt portfolio, which never crossed 20% for a long time in our history, but within this regime crossed the 50% mark in 2019. Everything down to policy failure. And therefore, this government and President Akufo-Addo must accept responsibility for where we are. That is the bottom of his point, from my appreciation of it. We'll be right back.
At the just ended cabinet retreat at Peduasi Lodge, my government agreed on the framework for the post-COVID-19 program for economic growth and the IMF support for its implementation, as well as the work being done by the Ministry of Finance in preparation for the 2023 budget. At the retreat, we took some firm decisions that should put us on the path that will take our nation out of the current economic difficulties. Let me try and give you an outline of the main decisions without getting into the technical language that baffles many of us. To restore and sustain debt sustainability, we plan to reduce our total public debt to GDP ratio to some 55% in present value terms by 2028. With the servicing of our external debt pegged at not more than 18% of our annual revenue, also by 2028. We're committed to improving the revenue collection effort from the current tax revenue to GDP ratio of 13% to between 18 and 20% to be competitive with our peers in the West African region. The Ghana Revenue Authority is rolling out an extensive set of measures to support the enhanced revenue mobilization. All of us must do our patriotic duty and support the GRA in this exercise. We're aiming to restore and sustain macroeconomic stability within the next 3 to 6 years, with a focus on ensuring debt sustainability to promote durable and inclusive growth while protecting the poor. We've decided to review the reforms in the energy sector, the capping of statutory funds, implementation of the Exemptions Act, and a new property rate regime. We've also decided to continue with the policy of 30% cut in the salaries of political office holders, including the President, the Vice President, ministers, deputy ministers, MMDCs, and SOE appointees in 2023.
Right, so that's His Excellency the President, Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo, addressing the country on Sunday night. We're all glued to our sets watching him, and many have said that they expected a speech of a lifetime because of the present circumstances that people find themselves, and there are those who say they are disappointed. Is their disappointment because they are not reading the speech well, or I've read it a number of times, and I appreciate certain things that I feel initially, my initial reaction got changed after I read it a number of times more. But there are a number of issues that come up in the statement that we need to look at. He says there'll be no haircuts, as in your investment, your pensions will not be affected whatsoever. Is that true? It does appear that may also not be exactly the case. Now, let me get the reactions of these gentlemen. And thank you also. You have been on the line since we started this segment. And my apologies, I didn't introduce these other guests who are on the line right now. Let me do that right now and get their quick views. And then we will go to come to the studio and speak to our panelists also here. Kwame Sapong Esiedu is D&D Fellow on Public Health at CDD Ghana. He is pharmacist, member of the Royal Pharmaceutical Society of Great Britain and Pharmaceutical Society of Ghana and the Institute of Pharmacy Management International. Thank you for joining us, Kwame.
Thank you for having me. And
Great.
Good morning.
Thank you. And Godfred A. Bokwing is Professor of Finance and Economist, University of Ghana. Yes, let me begin with you, Godfred. Especially also on the back of, Bright Simon's presentation on Ghana, in intensive care. If you take that against the president's presentation, what do you have to say?
All right. Thank you, Samson. Good morning, and good morning to our cherished listeners and viewers. I lean towards Bright Simon's position. I think he has said a lot of the things that I had planned to say, and maybe I'll just add a couple of things. If you look at the data objectively, you will not disagree with Bright considerably. If you mean well for this country, you will not disagree because the data speaks loudly. Even if you decide to bring your political lenient to bear in terms of the value judgment you place on that data, you cannot digress substantially. But this is how I look at the president's speech. It was a missed opportunity for the president. The summary of it, the way I see it, is that there's a huge disconnect between the economy of the president and the immediate surroundings of the president, and then the ordinary Ghanaian on the streets. When I say there's a big disconnect, it manifests in the diagnosis and then the posture of the president and how he failed to carry all of us along. Bright has already spoken about some of the data issues and the rest of them. But look at it this way. What the market is asking for and what it will take us to get out of this, the president failed to respond to that. And that for me is a bit sad. When we say so, it's not like we don't like this country. It's not like we are doomsayers or something. But where we are and coming out of it, a lot rests with our policy decisions.
Prof, how did the president feel? After he said we are in a crisis, then he says that I cannot find an example in history when so many malevolent forces, is that not a fact, have come together at the same time. Then he doesn't stop there, regardless of the malevolent forces he speaks about. He doesn't stop there. Then he comes to say, but as we have shown in other circumstances, we shall turn this crisis into an opportunity to resolve not just the short-term urgent problems, but the long-term structural problems that have bedeviled our economy. That's where he begins to tell us about what the changes that are at the heart of his goal is to have a resilient, robust Ghanaian economy and building a Ghana beyond aid, which is what he has been pursuing since he took over office. Not so?
Yes, Samson. Leadership is also about recognizing the optimal time to act, and act at scale, act on time. The president missed that. If you look at the data Bright Simons presented, towards the end of last year, it was very clear that the market was unwilling to welcome us. In fact, and that's why we said that the best time to have made a call to the IMF was actually last year, towards the end of last year. We gave government the benefit of the doubt, right? And nobody should say that we have been too critical. Towards the end of last year, we said, look, let's look forward to the 2022 budget. If the 2022 budget will be able to convince investors, right, and offer a fiscal sustainability path. So there was a lot that the 2022 budget needed to deliver on. And the 2022 budget failed to deliver on that. And the president has acknowledged that, right? That is not a kind of invisible forces that came from somewhere to just swallow the budget aspiration.
Not invisible forces, malevolent forces.
Whatever you want to call it right now, right? So the 2022 budget failed to deliver on that mandate. The government came with enhanced measures. Again, that didn't do the trick. You know, so when Bryce Simons said that we should have taken advantage of the DSSI in 2020, you know why we didn't do so, Samson? It was because of our love for Eurobonds. So, because if Ghana had signed up for the debt service suspension initiative in 2020, that could have been interpreted to mean cross default, and that would have affected our credit rating and probably affected our ability to raise money from the international capital market. So we chose Eurobonds over that gains from the debt service suspension. But now, as you can see, we've lost both, because that is no more available. Now we're also talking about Ghana beyond Eurobonds. So these are certain actions and inactions over the years that probably has created some kind of credibility deficit surrounding or around the government policy prescription and implementation. Then I will narrow down to the debt servicing. You know, the market is very smart. Because of the structure of the economy, within the global economy, even the regional and all of that, the market is very smart. You cannot fool the market. So you went to the market August, try, and the market actually didn't receive you. But one of the creating agencies gave the government the benefit of the doubt. Okay, but when the 2022 budget failed to inspire hope and offer fiscal sustainability path, they downgraded us. You can compare that to Cote d'Ivoire, that consolidated its credit rating. And in the next couple of minutes, I'll just compare Ghana to Cote d'Ivoire, just briefly. So you are talking about debt restructuring, an outcome of your debt sustainability analysis. The market knows. So if you come and tell us that there will be no haircuts or realized investor losses baseline, and you fail to demonstrate the alternative on the table to get us to the debt sustainability level that you are talking about, cutoff point 2028, there's no way the market will trust you. There's no way the market will trust you. And there's no way any objective-minded person will say that, let's go with the statement. Ordinarily, I would have gone with my president. The reason is simple. He has access to every information, every expertise. He would have been briefed by his negotiation team, right? And so if the president said there will be no haircut, typically we should take it as that is it. But you are looking at the reality on the ground and you realize that it doesn't lend to what the president is saying, because whether we like it or not, once the government failed to demonstrate the level, the alternative on the table, and the government is unwilling to reduce the size of government, right, which Cote d'Ivoire did in April 2022 by reducing the number of ministers from 41 to 32. In fact, if you look at the report on Cote d'Ivoire, their economy was resilient to COVID and then Russia-Ukraine war, far better than Ghana. And that was consistent with what Bryce Simons was saying, that what COVID and then what Russia-Ukraine did to us was to actually reveal the local vulnerabilities that we were doing propaganda about over the years. So what has really revealed the reality on the ground to us is not about the opposition party or analysts or whoever. It has to take COVID, it has to take Russia-Ukraine to actually tell us the true state of our economy. And that is why you see the variation in Ghana and the rest of them. Cote d'Ivoire, hello?
Yes, make that point.
Decided that they will reduce the number of ministers. Côte d'Ivoire decided to introduce some level of price controls. Côte d'Ivoire decided to also implement import exemptions for certain basic or staple foods, just to moderate the impact of the Russia-Ukraine on the vulnerable. Côte d'Ivoire did all of this and even more. If you look at the COVID interventions, regular audit and update to the market in Côte d'Ivoire, including audit of state-owned enterprises in Côte d'Ivoire, which also led to the dismissal of certain heads of state-owned enterprises. They did all of these things because you need to do so in order to generate confidence in the government and the government machinery. But Ghana has failed to do that. And where we are heading towards, it will get to, if the president doesn't act decisively, it will get to a point, and the resignation of the finance minister or he being sacked may not be enough, and the president himself may have to resign.
Okay. Kwame Seydou-Sopong, so he, Professor Bokwin mentioned some things, and Occupy Ghana had issued a statement before the president's address and had a certain expectation. Number one, that the president will own the problem. Number two, that he will adopt what Occupy Ghana called a warlike approach, an emergency situation, what you do. And then number three, that he would have called people to the table. Well, he's calling people to the table. We know about that. But people are saying that he has not acted decisively and swiftly as far as issues about, you know, doing something further about his Obolo historic government, which he managed to reduce from 120 ministers, over 120 ministers to 85 ministers or so. John Mahama had advocated in his speech that he could cut down to 60 ministers. Professor Stephen Adai has stressed that we could actually cut to 40 ministers. That's what the president should do to show that we are in austerity situation, and this is what I'm also doing. We know Dr. Indum has said before that we can run with 20 ministers or so. Imani Africa has also been saying this. What do you say? Is that some of these things that people didn't see, including sacking people, that they seem to say that the president, you know, the speech was empty, quote unquote?
Yeah, thanks, Samson. And quick. There's something about perception and optics. For me, the president lost the optics argument. You've just demonstrated clearly with the size of government, with the fact that the finance minister is still in position, the fact that he didn't own the problem. It was like he was saying, no, it wasn't me. People have even started calling him Saggy because he says it wasn't me, it was the man behind the tree. There was no sense of we got this bit wrong. And yes, there were existential situations and they have opened up the mistakes we made. No, it was like we've got everything right. And these things have unfortunately unraveled our good intentions. I don't think that as humans and the global markets, everyone just believes words of mouth. Because even if you went by word of mouth, like Professor Bokwin was saying, immediately the president said no haircut. Kojo Oppong then comes out to explain what that actually meant. Does that lend credibility? No. And the other thing I would say about this whole issue of is that why the people are saying it was hollow, is the fact that while the speech was going on and the president was making the context, like I heard Richard Ahiagwa talk about why compared to Togo. I asked myself the question even before I got on, who brought in Togo? It was the president who actually made the full comparison. And that was where the Togo started from. So no one should come and tell us you don't compare to Togo. If we didn't, then the person leading us, who should lend us credibility, shouldn't have started a comparison in the first place. And when those comparisons were made, some of us who are signed up to statistical portals like Konima and Statista and the World Bank immediately went to check. And like the data Bryce Simmons showed, we started tweeting. I even actually put the Statista link on my Facebook page to say people should go and check. These things do not lend to credibility. And then the final point I would make, when the president said, Sika MPDD,
it was as though the only reason why the city was depreciating and our economy was in crisis was because people were talking down the city. Immediately, I disagreed because people started pulling the president's own tweets and the vice president's own tweets from 2013, 2014, including Gavi's tweets, talking about things like this. Did we see the level of depreciation of the city we are seeing now? Clearly not. So if you put all these things together, Samson, the president should not take us for people who do not actually think. And I'm using this very advisedly. We all think, we all look. Even if you look at the city after the president said, and that's the final point. We are now saying the city is exchanging to the dollar and the pound at specific rates. Yesterday, a friend of mine called me from Ghana who was looking for money. He's a pharmaceutical importer. He went to a bank thinking that the rates that were being quoted was what he was going to get. He went there, the bank said they didn't have any foreign exchange at that rate. This person is going to bring in life-saving drugs. And juxtapose it to the fact that the data we are picking indicates that, on average, pharmaceuticals have gone up by about 170% since December last year. And some have gone up even more than that. If you put all these together, Samson, one conclusion is reached. Yes, it was hollow. And yes, we have to say it because we need a general to own this problem and take us to war on the right footing. I don't think the president got that right.
Coming to you shortly, I want you to help us in a minute or two about what you think about what the president said. Definitely, he said, there shall not be haircuts. Your investments, individual or institutional, pensions, all of that will not be affected. But people are worried. They are receiving, notices. We have seen one from, EcoBank? We have seen one from Republic Bank. And of course, I don't know how myself as a presenter, I should be moderating such a discussion, especially after the first time when Dr. Theo Echampong spoke about it and we got a caution that we have a role to play and must be careful not to do things that will lead to a run on the banks. But here you are. There's someone who has this unit with one of the banks, and he goes every month. He gets 5,000. He's been there, and he's been told that he can only take 500. He's been very livid, very worried, and the explanation to him is that there are, rules and regulations as issued by the SEC, the Securities and Exchange. So I'm sure you have seen those from the banks. People's insurances, you must have insurance, comprehensive insurance and the rest of them. They are sending messages and telling us what we need to do or this is what we lose. Is the president right? I've seen the report, is it Bloomberg or the others, that say that the claim that there will not be haircut is also not sustainable. So I'll come to you on that. You get ready with that. Then come to the guys in the studio and to announce to all of you watching that we have an extension of about 10 minutes. So please bear with us. Once we are done, our team will be in the studio to take you live to the grounds of the demonstration. Yes, let me start with you, Richard. The president's speech. What do you say to those who feel that he let them down? Professor Stephen Adai, you know him. He's been in government. He's helped this government. He says we can even do 40 ministers. The president should be saying that a number of the ministers are gone. He's not doing anything like that.
Well, it's unfortunate you don't have so much time. But, the president's speech, the expectations, as I hear people have of it, is justified because they thought that it was coming to say certain specific things. That
this is important. I refer to EcoBank, EDC, not EcoBank, EDC, not EcoBank. Thank you very much.
Right, but then at the end, the president, the speech, there's a total of about 12 key issues that are takeaway from that I guess are significant. Now, we should be careful to note that what the speech will do will be different from what the budget will do. Now, in that speech, the president gave clear indication to what economic policy framework that government is looking at. And so the president referred to the macroeconomic stability that we're pursuing, directly linked to the IMF deal that we're pursuing, which is central to how we address our balance of payment challenges and how we're able to do keep up with our interest rate payment. So that is a key issue that the president highlighted. And now on that matter, I think we should dwell on that a little bit. And I once Simmons was speaking, I took some points, and I'm wondering the context of his analysis. And he realized that he did his analysis outside, in my view, didn't take the context in which the economy was operating into account. Now you have an economy that up until 2020, okay, was growing. You take inflation numbers that up until even 2020, our inflation was doing rather well. And so where exactly, when Simpson put the wrecking ball and thought that because we have inherent vulnerabilities and our economy just spiraled out of control. The issue, if you look at, which I think, sadly, Samson, that we are failing to acknowledge, is the context in which the economy is, which is the global situation, that has created an inflation that is not domestic. Now, your domestic inflation would have been driven essentially in large part by demand and supply factors, so that the economy will at one point be heating up, and so you needed policy measures to cool it down, or the economy will be slumping and you need measures to drive it through government, increased government spending to be able to regenerate economic activities. But this situation we're experiencing, none of it can be traced to domestic lack of policy response. And so I wonder, how is it that the analysis is not taking into account what the factors and the measures that government is taking domestically, how those are affecting or not affecting the issue, but then they are making a global assessment, okay, of the economy, looking only at the debt situation, looking only at the market situation. I think Simmons was talking about the 2021 pursuit of a Eurobond that really gave us up, because the market thought that we couldn't master the numbers to be able to justify our payment of such debt, and so therefore they won't borrow us money, and that for him was the beginning point of all of this. I don't think that is the case. The president address talks about how we are going to achieve macroeconomic stability. And how do you do that? You go into a contractionary policy. And I told you earlier, when the finance minister briefed his very most recent brief, I think in August or so, talked about how we are going to, the 7 key points that we are pursuing with the IMF: debt sustainability, fiscal consolidation. These are issues that you look at and see that what is government's response. Right now, if you are in this present time seeking to consolidate your economy, what are you doing? The monetary response is increasing policy rates, which essentially is to control inflation. But something you would agree that in spite of this monetary response to control inflation is going up, which tells you, earlier I told you about the imperfection of our market. Right. So as a result of that, you can tell from that measure that the problem you are going through is not domestic. I think just allow me one more minute, right? The problem you are going through is not domestic. The same policy, the same monetary policy, Samson, the United States is implementing that. Just recently, I think the 2nd of November, the U.S. Treasury increased their policy rate by 75 basis points to about 4%. The immediate reaction is that because it's a perfect market, you see a flight of investment moving to the United States because that market is perfect. So this analysis that must be done, they must be done in context, respecting the kind of market Alex, that you are talking about. Alex, so that's the unfortunate thing.
Alex, I'm hoping I can have
this analysis does not take in account.
3 minutes. Yes.
I think we should all listen carefully to the analysis that Imani and Bright Simmons has given, as well as the 2 other gentlemen. So any way you twist it, any way you try to spin or change it, the reality is that the mess was created by this government. And they are not prepared to accept it. That, for me, is crucial. Because
I mean, the numbers doesn't bear that argument.
Please proceed.
The numbers show us. The numbers show us that we have the worst currency exchange rate proposition in the world.
Because it's imported.
Why? We are the only country that imports.
I mean,
that's why we do like and like. What, I mean, you have had policy. You've got. Listen to the rendition. Listen carefully to what Bright was saying.
But that is not foolproof.
What is
an analysis that does not take the context?
Don't be answering to him. You said you do less than 3 minutes.
But he's interrupting me.
No, sorry. No, just proceed.
But this is my view. Take it or leave it. But this is my view. I believe that the analysis should be put on your websites of Bright Simmons. Let us all go in. Because it's fantastic. There are things in there which show that simple decisions or... Look, everybody knew that we should have gone to the IMF earlier. That is a policy decision. Was wrong.
No.
Everybody knows that the finance minister should have left earlier. It's a policy decision to the extent that your MPs have told you he must go. You are still telling us that we must wait. Meanwhile, when he was sick, it was the Speaker of Parliament who delivered the budget. So you don't need him to deliver the budget. Anybody can deliver a budget. It's a team that puts it together. Let us be clear.
All right.
Petrol and food are our biggest problems.
Right.
The speech was not in, what's it called?
I put a question to Bright about the haircuts. People are very, very interested. I understand Imani's work has projected that unless the president convenes an honest gathering of relevant persons to chart a way forward politically and economically, Ghana could face the worst socioeconomic and political crisis in the coming month, mainly because this government has not articulated a good plan out of the present woes and still persists in some bad moves. Example, the Gensa deal. Haircuts. Is the president correct on it? Bright Simmons, in a minute. Hello, Bright.
Yes, very quickly, Samson. The president spoke and then the information minister came and gave us more details. Quick highlights. They said they want to follow the Jamaica role model, the Jamaica case as their role model. And you know Jamaica did a debt restructuring in 2010. What the information minister did not add was that because they went that route of not doing a principal haircut, but only tried to extend the time for paying the debt, which is what we call a maturity extension, and did some coupon haircut or simply reduced interest, Jamaica had to do it twice. So that is already giving us a hint that what the government might do is to try and attempt a debt restructuring that does not go deep enough, then hope that the next government or the successive government is then tasked with the duty of trying to fix the rest of the problem. That's a very important issue. The second issue is that when Jamaica was doing what it was doing, it had international market access the next year because of the fact that the second time around, the IMF had threatened that if they don't do a principal haircut of 25%, then they have to do deep coupon discounts. So you have very limited room to maneuver. If you don't cut the actual debt stock, then you must cut the interest dramatically, which must have liquidity. So that's another lesson we can take from Jamaica.
Okay.
The third lesson, and the most important one, is that we have to be careful the way that we are banking everything on a timeline that we don't control, which is that IMF, when the president was reported to have responded to the MPs. Everything was about the IMF deal must happen in 2 weeks.
That's right. Okay, Bright, I'm sorry, but we don't have time to continue. I'm sure people have seen the Republic Bank, statement to the public notice, and the other one, the EDC, and people are commenting whether there will be haircut or not. Let's get the experts to help us to appreciate all of that. I have been speaking with Martin Pebu. He was on the grounds of the demonstration ongoing, Nana Must Go hashtag. Kofi Bentil also was with us. Godfrey Bokwing spoke to us. Bright Simmons made a presentation. Kwame Sapong-Esiedu and Richard Anyagba here in the studio together with Alexander Segbefia, NDC Director of International Relations. I'm Samson Lardy Anyenini, and my outfit, as always, is by Habil's Couture. You can get them at Ajuringano Gate, East Legon, or call 0200 84 1988. This has been Newsfile. God willing, we'll come your way next week with another edition. Have a good afternoon.